Chapter 87. At a glance, countless meteorites floated in the sky, large and small. Some meteorites were only the size of gravel, and some were as large as a mountain. They completely ignored the so-called law of gravity and floated in the void so easily. The sky full of meteorites filled the endless void, leisurely and calmly circling above Kinsusanu's head. Controlling gravity, is this the ability of the Tensigen? Or is this just one of the many abilities of the Tensigen, one of the most insignificant abilities of the Tensigen? Dustless raised his clear eyes slightly, and the scarlet Mangekyo Sharingan stirred up faint ripples. Looking at Otsutsuki Haruo, whose silver-white hair was like a fresh waterfall, Dustless frowned slightly, then raised his eyelids slightly, and the streamer in the corner of his eyes vaguely glanced at the group of meteorites, and then dispersed. His emotions were extremely calm, and there was no fear at all. For the sake of the same ancestor, call out the Gedo Mazo, and I will spare your life. Staring at Dustless, seeing that Dustless was as indifferent as a rock, a touch of indifference flashed in her beautiful eyes, and then she manipulated many meteorites floating in the sky to land around Kinsusanu, and countless deep pits suddenly appeared on the ground, and dust flew everywhere. Didn't I say that the reason why I stole the Gedo Mazo was to resurrect the Jubi? Stupid woman, you are still so naive, and you want to use your mouth to make me surrender. Dustless's delicate face showed ridicule, and the curve of his mouth was even more disdainful. He looked at Otsutsuki Haruo with a sneer, and the contempt in his eyes was undisguised. Dustless didn't think that Otsutsuki Kagaya's face was big enough for Otsutsuki Uroku to let him go safely. The so-called not letting him die was probably imprisoning him on the moon forever. Dustless could see that Otsutsuki Haruo was very interested in his jutsu, especially in the body structure. There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you're throwing yourself into it. Since you want to die so much, I'll fulfill your wish. Her phoenix eyes glared at Dustless, and under the Tensigen chakra mode, Yuro's eyes flashed with anger, and she waved her hand down, and countless giant meteorites floating in the void flew towards Kinsusanu. Boom boom boom. The boundless meteorites fell like a dense rainstorm. Although Susanoo also tried its best to resist, smashing the meteorites close to it into ruins one by one, but due to the number of meteorites being too dense, Susanoo was still buried deep inside. Bang bang bang. Huge chunks of the mountain fell from the sky and piled up. In just a few breaths of time, it had formed an unprecedentedly large and vast mountain range. Seeing that Dustless was buried by dustless meteorites, Otsutsuki Haruo's face was filled with anger, and her undulating chest finally calmed down. Her white and tender hand brushed the messy hair beside her ear, and she breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that he's finally decapitated ka. Just when Otsutsuki Haruo thought that Dustless was killed, the ground under her feet quickly cracked open, and a golden light gushed out from the ground and stopped in midair. Dustless's right calf suddenly flashed with light, and the golden brilliance instantly shrouded and gathered. Light speed kick. Otsutsuki Haruo calmly looked at the heavy blow that was roaring towards her. Her beautiful face was expressionless, and her temperament was elegant and refined. She didn't put the golden light in her eyes at all. A mere ant wants to shake the heavens and the earth. You're overestimating yourself. Otsutsuki Haruo didn't dodge, and stood indifferently. Her whole body emitted an emerald green defensive energy shield, protecting her inside, directly ignoring the heavy blow that was roaring towards her. Boom! Dustless's foot fell, and the ground suddenly trembled. Countless cracks could be clearly seen, and the ground quickly collapsed. However, the green defensive wall was safe and sound. Especially the hardness that came from his foot made Dustless frown slightly. Looking at the unscathed emerald green defensive wall, he quickly turned into light and opened a distance. What a hard turtle shell. Gently raising his gaze and looking at the unshakable defensive barrier in the distance, Dustless raised his brows slightly, and his eyes were full of caution, muttering to himself in his heart, "What a tricky ability." Dustless still clearly remembered that in the future, Otsutsuki Haruo had the ability to control the truth-seeking ball. In front of him, Otsutsuki Haruo seemed to be born with the Tensigen, so there was no reason why she couldn't operate it. Whoosh! Just as Dustless was pondering, Otsutsuki Haruo completely activated her defense and turned into a hurricane. When Dustless raised his head and realized that it was her, she had already appeared beside him. Because they were too close, Dustless could clearly smell the body fragrance coming towards him, and the extraordinarily light smell made him slightly absent-minded. He liked this kind of simple and elegant smell very much in his previous life, and he couldn't help but look at the small face close to him. This was the first time that Dustless observed Otsutsuki Haruo so closely. Her deep eyes were as clear as spring water, untainted by even a speck of dust. Her face was delicate and her facial features were well defined. Due to the intense battle earlier, one could faintly smell the fragrant sweat on her body. Is it possible that she wants to throw herself at me? Looking at Otsutsuki Haruo, Dustless's face was full of doubts, and he couldn't help but think in his heart, and suddenly he was enraptured. However, Dustless obviously overestimated his charm, and a strange cool feeling suddenly gushed out from his eyebrows. Dustless was slightly stunned, and subconsciously raised his head, and the scene that came into sight made Dustless lose his ability to think in an instant. He saw Otsutsuki Haruo's hand pressing Dustless's eyebrows, and the cool feeling came from her hand. This guy wants to. Bastard. Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Haruo's indifferent face in surprise, and immediately saw her small hand close to him emitting a green light, and suddenly felt a powerful spirit invading his mind, and he immediately knew what she had made up her mind. Want to use the ability of the Tensigen to extract my memory? You are too naive. Chapter 88. Dustless's face was extremely ugly. Otsutsuki Haguro's idea was nothing more than wanting to use Dustless's memory to obtain the location of the Geto Mazo. After knowing where the Geto Mazo was hidden, he would immediately run to the earth and snatch the Geto Mazo. Don't even think about it. Dustless's body suddenly flashed with a dazzling golden light. His body lost its texture, and his whole body turned into a stream of light, exuding an unusually hot light. It's hot. Feeling the sudden increase in temperature, Otsutsuki Haguro subconsciously retracted her jade fingers. Her jade fingers were burned red, and she couldn't help but stare at Dustless angrily. Seeing Otsutsuki Haguro retracting her hand, Dustless also quickly moved away. You want to extract my memory? Go home and practice for 2 more years. Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Haguro sarcastically, and then said with great disdain. At the same time, he sighed that the Tensigen was worthy of being an eye of the same level as the Rinnegan, and some of its abilities were almost exactly the same. It seems that you know the ability of the Tensigen quite well. Otsutsuki Haguro frowned. Looking at Dustless's omniscient appearance, the Tensigen seemed to be no different from his. Otsutsuki Haguro couldn't help but have doubts in his heart. Not to mention Dustless, who came from a foreign land. Even in the Otsutsuki clan, there are not many people who have really seen the Tensigen. Their understanding is limited to books, and they haven't seen what the real Tensigen looks like. More than just understanding, soon I will have the same eyes as you. Do you think it took me so much effort to come to this ghost place to look for trouble? Completely ignoring Otsutsuki Haguro, Dustless's mouth was swept with a cruel smile, and he had never seen this kind of hand seal before. Summoning Jutsu, Hachibi. Ao ao ao. The monster with 8 tentacles was suddenly summoned by Dustless, and its murderous roar resounded through the moon. The difference was that at this moment, Hachibi's eyes were crimson red. Obviously, it had been forcibly controlled by Dustless. The 8 huge tentacles danced strangely, roaring unscrupulously. The roar from the big mouth was deafening, and the endless impact spread out along with the roar. This is a tailed beast? Looking at the Hachibi's 8 tails, Otsutsuki Haruo was extremely surprised. Immediately, his beautiful eyes stopped on Wu Chun, and his eyes emitted a burst of light. The prerequisite for resurrecting the Jubi is to gather all the 9-tailed beasts. As long as I leave this old man here, even if he has the Geto Mao Geto, it will be useless. Haguro was directly then Haguro. Was Hachibi was directly ignored. Then Hachibi. Then tamed to Haguro's. Not to mention that the tailed beast in front of her only has 8 tails. She can even tame the Supreme Kyubi. Now let's destroy the Otsutsuki clan Go Hachibi. Woo. Ao ao ao. As Dustless's voice fell, the Hachibi controlled by Sharingan roared again. Chakra raged, and its huge body turned to look at the gathering place of the Otsutsuki clan in the distance. It opened its big mouth, and the evil energy ball was clearly visible. An unprecedented huge Baijidama was slowly taking shape, and it was about to erupt. You dare to lay hands on my people, you are courting death. Haguro's eyes suddenly turned blood red. Her people were her reverse scale, and she regarded them as the most precious existence. Seeing the Hachibi's Baijidama in the direction of the Otsutsuki clan, her whole body was like the eyes of ice. An endless cold wind swept out from her body. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The giant tornado, which was powerful enough to easily crush meteorites into pieces, swept quickly toward the Hachibi. Its power was destructive, and everything that came in contact with the hurricane was annihilated. This woman is really ruthless. Feeling the power of the giant chakra tornado, Dustless nodded secretly. If the Hachibi is hit, he will definitely die, and he will die completely. You have to look at the master before beating the dog. You want to kill my pet in front of me. Where is my face? Looking at the tornado that was about to turn the Hachibi into minced meat, Dustless's face suddenly became gloomy, and his Manjikyu Sharingan flashed with an unusually hot luster, and chakra erupted, and a calm and powerful roar resounded between the heaven and earth. Uchiha Flame Formation. On the side of the Hachibi, who was preparing the Baijidama, suddenly a huge flame barrier was formed, and the blazing heat seemed to come from the furnace in the depths of the netherworld. It was extremely hot and extremely stable, protecting the Hachibi. Boom boom boom. The powerful and unparalleled tornado hit the flame barrier, and the two suddenly produced a huge explosion, and the flame barrier was inevitably torn into pieces by the tornado. But the fierce momentum of the Silver Wheel Reincarnation explosion was also turned into dust and completely subsided. Hateful. Seeing that his trick was easily broken, Otsutsuki Hagura stomped his feet in anger, and his eyes flashed with determination, and then he raised his white and tender little hand towards the Hachibi, and a powerful repulsive force erupted. Boom. The Hachibi, who was focused on condensing the Baijidama, was instantly sent flying out of thin air, and his huge body suddenly became as light as paper, and he was bounced hundreds of meters away by the strong repulsive force. Phew! A sharp sound of breaking the air sounded, and looking up, the huge Baijidama was rushing towards the Otsutsuki clan. Although the Hachibi was sent flying before, the Baijidama was successfully condensed and shot out. Seeing that the Baijidama was about to destroy the Otsutsuki clan, Otsutsuki Hagoromo made a prompt decision. His reincarnation eyes flashed with hostility, and a straight golden beam swept out. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. In the blink of an eye, the golden light beam extended for thousands of meters and caught up with the Baijidama, and under the sluggish gaze of Dustless, the golden light beam went straight towards the Baijidama. He could clearly see that the golden light beam directly penetrated the Baijidama and easily cut it. Chapter 89. The 1,000-meter-long golden beam was like an angry god's full blow, destroying the sky and the earth, splitting the flowing air into two. The Baijidama was easily split in half and burst open, setting off a huge explosion. Not to mention splitting the Baijidama of the Hachibi into two, it wouldn't be difficult to split the entire moon. Boom 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 boom. An ear-piercing and terrifying explosion suddenly shook the sky, and a huge wave of fire suddenly rose from the Otsutsuki clan's residence. Looking at it, the terrifying air waves were like waves of destruction, and the entire Otsutsuki clan was blown up by the dazzling golden light. The energy fluctuation that spread out was really too terrifying. Even Dustless was blown back by that super strong air wave, by more than 10 meters. Taking a deep breath, Dustless looked at the huge fireworks over the town where the Otsutsuki clan lived, and he could clearly feel the unprecedented huge power. This is also the Tensigen, and it's more powerful than Otsutsuki Hagura's. Looking at the huge fire in the void, Dustless had an unprecedented bad feeling in his heart. thinking of the terrifying weapon created by the Otsutsuki branch family after the fusion of many Byakugan. His heart suddenly lit up, and he subconsciously looked at Otsutsuki Hagura. Sure enough, Otsutsuki Hagura's face was also full of shock, and even with a little fear. Even if he hit it well, Dustless was still extremely keen to catch it. The depths of Otsutsuki's eyes were cold and desperate. Damn it, without my permission. Who gave you the confidence? Who gave you the right to fight among yourselves? Because of the violent anger, Dustless's face was distorted, and the hostility surging out of his pupils was like an evil ghost. And even the sharp screams of thousands of ghosts could be heard, and his murderous aura burst out. The civil war means that the Otsutsuki clan may end early, and Dustless's Tensigen plan may be ruined. For Dustless, who has no Otsutsuki bloodline, a large number of pure Otsutsuki clan blood must be exchanged for blood. We must stop those damned branch families. Their eyes quickly exchanged glances, but at this moment, Otsutsuki Hagoromo rushed out, giving up the crusade against Dustless, and swept towards the place where the explosion sounded like a hurricane. Seeing Otsutsuki leave, Dustless gritted his teeth and followed. There was something wrong with that enormous power just now. Could it be? Thinking of this, Dustless's face suddenly changed. There are two ways to give birth to the Tensigen. As for the origin of Otsutsuki's Tensigen, Dustless didn't know. The first way is to have the bloodline of Otsutsuki, and then transplant the pure Byakugan. The second way is actually the fusion of countless Byakugan, which is extremely powerful. The power of the moon is from this Tensigen. No wonder Otsutsuki's branch family destroyed the main family, so that's why. Dustless's eyes flashed with a flash of realization. He was afraid that the branch family not only dug out the Byakugan, but also stole the power in the Tensigen, which was formed by the fusion of countless Byakugan, so they dared to attack the main family. Damn things, your clan is all mine. Without my order, you dare to start a war without permission. How dare you? His face suddenly changed, Dustless's murderous intent was revealed, and his eyes shot out a piercing cold light. He has already taken the Otsutsuki clan as his own. Now, without his order, these clowns dared to cause internal strife. It was really hateful. Without the Otsutsuki clan, Dustless wouldn't have the chance to obtain the bloodline of Otsutsuki. Thinking that his plan of using the Tensigen might be ruined, Dustless's speed became even faster, tearing and distorting the void along the way. Boom boom boom. Inside the ancient city of Otsutsuki, the ear-piercing sound of explosions continued, and a wave of air completely turned this ancient city, which had existed for thousands of years, into a hell on earth. Looking around, the ground was full of broken corpses and rotten flesh. The ground was almost covered with bright red blood, and the stench of the corpses was everywhere. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the depths of purgatory. A large number of Otsutsuki branch family members were ruthlessly killing the main family members. If they encountered an enemy that was easy to kill, they would directly use the Tensigen weapons to kill them. For a time, it became a one-sided situation. Stop it, you bastards! His voice was filled with boundless rage, as well as a towering killing intent. It was none other than Otsutsuki Ulua, whose face was filled with a sinister coldness. When he saw the members of the Zone clan being slaughtered in an instant, his chest was filled with unprecedented flames. His entire person was like a volcano that was about to erupt, exuding a strong sense of destruction. Haguro's pretty face was filled with anger, his eyes staring at the oval, stone-like strange weapons, and the fear in the depths of his eyes flashed away. You're really crazy. Taking a deep breath, Haguro's cold voice resounded through the sky, looking at the round stone with fear. But there was more killing intent in his eyes. Because those are the fusion of the Byakugan, creating so many Tensigen weapons means that these crazy branch family members slaughtered many of their own family members, and used all their Byakugan to fuse. It's your family who misinterpreted the true meaning of ancestor Hamura. The world created by Haguro's son Nin is a failure, and the turmoil of the past thousands of years has already proved everything. Next to the Tensigen weapons on the ground, a middle-aged man walked out. This middle-aged man's face was pale, his eyes were hollow, and the corners of his mouth were particularly sharp, giving a very feminine feeling. When Otsutsuki Haguro saw this person come out, his eyes suddenly narrowed. The person in front of him was called Otsutsuki Haguro, the master of the branch family. It can be clearly seen that the master of the branch family, Otsutsuki Haguro, has a few black tomo on his chest. He belongs to the Otsutsuki clan with extremely high bloodline purity. In other words, people with high bloodline purity like him are the target of Dustless's hunting. Chapter 90. Otsutsuki Hagoromo looked at the Tensigen weapons on the ground with a pale face. Looking around, there were no less than 10, reaching a terrifying number of 15. Even if you dig out all the Byakugan of the branch family and the main family, it's impossible to integrate so many Tensigen. Otsutsuki Hagoromo's face was pale. Such a fusion requires a huge number of Byakugan. Each Tensigen weapon requires at least hundreds of pairs of Byakugan, or even thousands of pairs of Byakugan. And this bastard took out 15 at once. It can be seen how many Byakugan he plundered. So what? I just followed the true meaning of Ancestor Hamura and destroyed the earth. Even if they pay with their eyes, including myself, they are willing to do so. The middle-aged man named Otsutsuki Hagoromo said indifferently. Even if his eyeballs were also dug out to make Tensigen weapons, he didn't regret it. Your main family can't understand Hamura's true meaning at all. Putting aside the past thousands of years of war, this time the Geto Mazo has been stolen, which has explained everything. Even if Otsutsuki Hagoromo didn't have eyes, he could easily perceive the position of Otsutsuki Hagoromo. Bastard, it's your branch family who misunderstood the true meaning of the ancestor. However, now you even used the Tensigen to destroy the main family. You deserve to die. Otsutsuki Hagoromo said coldly. Her cold voice was like a biting cold wind. And even because of her excessive anger, the blue veins on her forehead could be clearly seen. This group of branch family members has completely fallen. The reason why they have so many Byakugan to make Tensigen weapons is because they stole the power of that. Otsutsuki Hagoromo's face was pale. What she said was naturally the Tensigen. It was the largest Tensigen, and also the source power that provided the moon's rotation. Since the death of Otsutsuki Hagoromo, the Otsutsuki Hagoromo who died thousands of years ago would dig out the Byakugan to supplement their power. Are you crazy? Otsutsuki Hagoromo scolded angrily. This guy is crazy enough to extract the Byakugan from the Tensigen that powers the moon. Nonsense. I am only following the wishes of my ancestors. After killing you, the last person of the Zone family, I will completely guide the moon to crash into the earth. This way, even if the Geto statue is lost, the Jubi will not revive. Yumi Otsutsuki's voice was unusually firm. As long as the moon crashed into the earth, the latter would naturally be destroyed. At that time, no matter who stole the Geto Mazo, they would inevitably die. You lunatic! Looking at Otsutsuki Hagoromo and the Tensigen weapons made by the Byakugan behind him, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes showed unprecedented panic. She knew that she was no match for the 15 Byakugan harvesters in front of her. What should we do? We can't leave these branch family members alone. They've already been blinded. Otsutsuki Hagoromo looked at the branch family members who had been completely swallowed by the Byakugan, and her heart inevitably fell to the bottom. Her pretty face was full of resentment, and immediately a bitter smile rose from the corner of her mouth. The Otsutsuki family, which had been passed down for thousands of years, was going to be completely destroyed in her hands. You're really boasting. A mere specimen dares to boast about destroying the world. You're just a crazy child. An unusually harsh voice resounded through the sky, full of magic, and didn't dissipate for a long time. Looking up, it was a leisurely face. No one knew when it started, but it was already standing in the void, but its whole body exuded a cold chill, and its eyes were blood-red, filled with boundless raging intent. My future specimen, who gave you the right to start a war? A voice that seemed to come from the depths of hell resounded through the endless void. The cold voice with boundless killing intent made everyone, including Otsutsuki Hagoromo, stunned. Sage art. Yasakani no Magatama. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Boundless golden light roared down, and the dense number dyed the sky golden yellow. The dizzying number formed a large area of energy, And under the golden light, everything was forbidden. Damn it! Looking at the innumerable dense numbers pouring down like a rainstorm, Otsutsuki Hagoromo swallowed hard. Although he couldn't see what was going on outside, he could still feel that he was locked on by thousands of dense destructive rays. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Such a huge range, such a dense number, mercilessly harvested the lives of the Otsutsuki family, almost slaughtering them, because most of these people's eyes were dug out to make Tensigen, and they couldn't completely perceive it. This guy, staring at the cold face of Dustless, Otsutsuki Hagoromo was slightly stunned, and suddenly realized that Dustless chose to invade the moon from thousands of miles away, and now Otsutsuki Hagoromo did this, undoubtedly crossing his bottom line. Serves you right. Looking at the scattered branch family members, Otsutsuki Hagoromo had an indescribable joy in his heart, because it was they who used the Tensigen to destroy the main family. Now retribution has come. Attack for me. The furious Otsutsuki Hagoromo roared, indicating to quickly manipulate the Tensigen to attack Dustless and Hagoromo in the sky. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. 15 Tensigen weapons immediately shot out dazzling rays of light, aiming at Dustless and Hagoromo. The power was extremely powerful, not inferior to the ultimate move of Golden Wheel reincarnation. Insignificant skill. Looking at the light beam rushing towards him, Dustless's face was full of contempt, and with a disdainful attitude, his pupils looked at the light beam coming towards him indifferently, and without dodging, he crossed his arms in front of him. Poochie. The destructive light beam directly penetrated Dustless, but the place where it was penetrated only emitted a faint golden light, and soon the place where it was penetrated was restored, unable to hurt him at all. This kind of pure physical attack is ineffective against me. Chapter 91. Although Dustless can be immune to this terrifying physical attack, Otsutsuki Hagura can't be ignored. She is immortal, and she doesn't have Dustless's heaven-defying ability. Especially when Otsutsuki Hagura saw that it didn't work on Dustless. She used all 15 Tensigen weapons to attack Otsutsuki Hagura. In just a few breaths of time, he was already in a sorry state, completely on the verge of defeat. These things are good, maybe I can use them in the future. Looking at the Otsutsuki clan's Tensigen weapons on the ground, Dustless's face was full of yearning, and his clear pupils were full of undisguised covetousness. This kind of Tensigen weapon may not be as practical as the Tensigen, but its power is beyond doubt. If there is no such thing as Dustless, the branch family will soon use this to destroy the main family. I can't let her die. Looking at the defeated Otsutsuki Hagura, Dustless frowned slightly. Although this woman is a bit savage and ferocious, she also has the Tensigen, and he can't let her die like this. Even if she is wrong, the Tensigen is right. It seems that I have to use that. Taking a deep breath, Dustless's face was full of determination, and at the same time, his scarlet Mangekyo stared at the besieged Otsutsuki Hagura, and a strong fluctuation suddenly surged in the Mangekyo. A huge aura floated all over his body, and 2 bloodstains suddenly flowed out of the corners of Dustless's eyes. Chakra energy was obviously mixed with the chakra energy of the first generation. It is the brand new dojutsu born after Dustless merged with the cells of the first generation Hashirama. And it is also one of his biggest cards at present. Thank me, stupid woman, but let me use this ultimate ability. It's not without reward. After the matter is done, give me your Tensigen. Divine Providence. After saying that, dark red blood suddenly flowed out of the corners of Dustless's eyes, and his pupils suddenly enlarged. Damn it, am I going to die? Looking at the roaring golden light beam, Otsutsuki Hagura's beautiful eyes dimmed. After a series of battles, there was no chakra left in her body, and the chakra that was born was not enough to save her life, and she will definitely die. Poochie. The golden light directly penetrated Otsutsuki Hagura's body, and pierced her chest directly, and then the light beam completely penetrated her body. This is, Otsutsuki Haguro, who thought that he would die, looked at the wound in surprise. There was no blood stain that should be there when he was injured. Instead, there was only a faint golden light, which was very warm. Not to mention the signs of life passing away, There was no sense of the most basic pain. I didn't die. Feeling that her whole body was filled with a warm halo, Otsutsuki Hagura was very surprised. And there was no joy on her pretty face, but she looked at Dustless in the distance in puzzlement. Because in the battle with Dustless, she used this strange trick to ignore any physical attack. Impossible. How can you not die? That guy was penetrated by the light beam of the Tensigen. How can he not die? Otsutsuki Hagura on the ground naturally felt the abnormality of Otsutsuki Hagura, and immediately screamed with endless disbelief and confusion in her tone. How can he not die after being penetrated? This seems to be the ability of that kid. Remembering that Dustless avoided the attack of the Tensigen in such a strange way before, Otsutsuki Hagura was surprised, and at the same time, her pitch-black pupils without eyes swept in the direction of Dustless. Including Otsutsuki Hagura's eyes, all looked at Dustless. TSKTs. It was discovered after using it once. It seems that this technique is full of loopholes. Seeing that both Otsutsuki Hagura and Hagura were looking at him, Dustless couldn't help but shrug, and then said helplessly, in fact, it was tantamount to admitting the two's thoughts. Why did he save me? Otsutsuki Hagura stared at Dustless with her bright watery eyes, and her hatred for Dustless in her heart gradually decreased, and immediately looked at the large bloodstains in the corner of Dustless's left eye, and her heart was particularly complicated, because she knew that it was caused by saving him, and obviously it cost a lot to save him. Don't thank me. Just give me your Tensigen as a thank you gift afterwards. Seeing Otsutsuki Hagura looking at him with a complicated expression, Dustless touched his nose, and then smiled calmly, as if this was how it should be. You fart. Hearing this, Otsutsuki Hagura's mouth suddenly twitched fiercely, and her words were incoherent. Her good impression of Dustless disappeared in an instant, and her eyebrows were slightly raised, and she couldn't wait to slap Dustless to death. Obviously, Dustless caused her to be smashed into pieces, and the Tensigen was completely destroyed, so he saved her. Don't show such a surprised expression. Manjikyu Sharingan may not be as good as Rinnegan and Tensigen, but this iron rule doesn't seem to work on me. Dustless chuckled softly, and immediately his pupils suddenly narrowed, and the gaze reflected from the slits of his eyes was awe-inspiring and domineering. His whole body was shining, like a shining sword, showing its sharpness, and cutting the world. Sharingan is known as the soul portrayal eye. The darker the heart of the host, the stronger the desire for power, the stronger the eye power of the Sharingan will be, and the darker the heart will be, so it is called the soul portrayal eye. Touching his eyes, Dustless wiped the bloodstains from the corners of his eyes, and said in a deep voice, in other words, the more power it pursues, the stronger the eye power will be, and the same is true for the ability of the eye. It is precisely because of Dustless's supreme desire for power that his eye power is abnormally strong, and he has such a strange ability to give the ability of his glint fruit to others. Since you are about to die, I will tell you the ability of my left eye. Divine Providence. This is the ability of my left eye, and it can give any power in my body to others. Chapter 92. Giving one's own ability to others. In fact, this kind of ability that has never been seen before is tantamount to stepping into the realm of gods, and it doesn't belong to the category of the so-called ninjutsu at all. Looking at the ancient sages, there has never been such a heaven-defying dojutsu. Fart. How can a mere mortals I have this kind of ability? The first person to refute was naturally Otsutsuki Yumi, with a face full of contempt. Maybe the Sharingan is very powerful, but is it as powerful as the legendary Rinnegan and Tensigen? Obviously, it's impossible. How can a mere mortals I have such a heaven-defying ability? Who knows? Looking at Otsutsuki Yumi who was ridiculing him, Dustless smiled faintly, but secretly shook his head. He didn't think that the ability of his left eye was so heaven-defying, because compared with the ability of his right eye, it's really not worth mentioning. Giving any of his own power to others. This guy really has this kind of ability that only gods can get involved in. Feeling the difference in her body, Otsutsuki Yumi said in her heart. She can clearly feel the changes in her body. And this is undoubtedly the most right to speak. This guy. Looking at Dustless's elegant face, Otsutsuki Yumi's heart was extremely complicated, and her eyes were full of despair. If she guessed correctly, it's very likely that the person who will end the Otsutsuki clan is the invader from the earth in front of her. It was the greatest irony that Otsutsuki, who was above all things in the world, would one day be destroyed by the earthlings who came after him. Quietly staring at the strange Manjikyu Sharingan, Otsutsuki Yumi didn't hate Dustless. Although Dustless said that he will destroy the Otsutsuki clan, the number of people who really died in the hands of Dustless is less than 5. As for how many people of the branch family were killed by Dustless, it doesn't matter to her. Although the ability of this move is somewhat heaven-defying, it is not invincible. Sighing in his heart, Dustless was slightly disappointed. Every ninjutsu has a weakness, and his divine providence is no exception. For example, Dustless gave his elemental transformation to Otsutsuki Dustless. During this period, Dustless himself can't use elemental transformation. In short, Dustless would not be able to use the ability he had given the other party before he took it back. Summoning technique. 8 tails. Bang. Ayo. A monster with 8 tentacles suddenly appeared. It was Hachibi with many scars all over its body. Its huge eyes were still in the state of 3 Tomo Sharingan. Obviously, it was still controlled by Dustless. This is a tailed beast? Yumi Otsutsuki looked at Hachibi's 8 tails and immediately noticed the amount of chakra in Hachibi's body. His cold eyes looked at Dustless, and his killing intent became stronger. You should be the one who stole Geto Mazo, right? Staring at the indifferent Dustless, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Only then did he realize that the loss and traces of the Geto Mazo were all related to Dustless, an intruder who was not Otsutsuki. It's just a specimen. Since the Geto Mazo that you Otsutsuki were guarding has been lost, there's no need for it to exist anymore. But someone with a pure Otsutsuki bloodline like you can be used as nourishment for the Geto Mazo, Dustless said bluntly. Anyway, Otsutsuki's main family has been destroyed by the branch family, but there are still many pure-blooded people, such as Otsutsuki in front of him. The black tomo on his chest explained everything. Although the number is not enough, it can still be cultivated by the Geto Mazo. After all, Uchiha Madara can use a piece of meat to cultivate countless cells of Hashirama. Although the Otsutsuki clan is fragmented, there are still many special existences. Kill him for me. Hearing this, Otsutsuki was furious. Dustless actually treated the most noble Otsutsuki clan in the world as nourishment. How could he not be angry? Whoosh! The Tensigan weapon immediately aimed at Dustless. Since Dustless has given the elementization ability to Otsutsuki, he naturally can't use elementization to nullify physical attacks. Idiot, it seems that you don't understand the specific use of my left eye. Looking at the rapidly approaching golden light, Wuchen smiled contemptuously. He calmly jumped onto Hachibi's head and crossed his arms in front of him. His expression was calm and his indifferent temperament was full of strong confidence. He didn't care about the incoming light at all. Dustless's pupils suddenly widened, and he released his eye power towards the Hachibi under his feet. God's grace. Heaven's gift. Whoosh! Just as the beam of light projected by the Tensigan weapon was about to approach Hachibi and Wuchen, the huge body of Hachibi disappeared strangely as if it was teleported. On the vast plain, the Hachibi seemed to have never appeared, and together with Dustless on top of his head, they disappeared out of thin air, and the Tensigan light beam that swept over naturally hit nothing. Impossible. Noticing that Dustless and the Hachibi were not crushed by the Tensigan weapon, Otsutsuki's powerful perception ability immediately spread out, surveying the environment within a radius of a few miles one by one, and after realizing that there was no one around, he immediately screamed. What a joke, the huge body of the Hachibi can't just disappear like that. That's impossible. What's there to be surprised about? I should have said before that the ability of my left eye is to bestow everything. I can bestow my ability to all things in the world, including Hachibi. A huge black shadow appeared behind Otsutsuki like a ghost, and its huge body covered the void, suddenly dimming the light. It was dustless and the Hachibi under his feet. Impossible. How can he move so fast? Otsutsuki looked at Dustless and the Hachibi who appeared behind Otsutsuki in horror, and he rubbed his eyes subconsciously, staring at the incredible scene in front of him. If it was said that Dustless had the speed of light, she could understand it, but the huge body of the Hachibi couldn't move fast at all, especially the speed of light just now. Idiot, there's nothing to be surprised about. Just now, I just gave the speed of light to the Hachibi. Chapter 93. Dustless's eyes were like torches, and the light emitted from his deep and bright pupils was extremely indifferent. His sharp eyes were like an eagle's, and anyone who was stared at by his scarlet Mangekyo would feel a sense of panic. Standing on the head of Hachibi, Dustless bit his white lips and looked at Otsutsuki's empty eyes. His Mangekyo Sharingan stirred up faint ripples, and Hachibi immediately moved. Whoosh! With a sharp sound, Hachibi's huge body suddenly moved, and his movement was extremely fast. Almost in an instant, he jumped across the vast space and instantly arrived in front of the Tensigan weapon. The majestic and endless chakra spread out, and suddenly the earth trembled slightly. Hachibi may not be as strong as Kyubi, and there is a gap in the amount of chakra, but as the second most powerful Bijou, his strength is beyond doubt. If he didn't encounter a natural enemy like Dustless who has Sharingan, I'm afraid not many people can take him down. Looking up suddenly, he saw Hachibi's powerful tentacles sweeping across the ground, and the ground was directly flattened, raising a hurricane-like dust, like a tornado raging in the sky, and the scornful destructive wind directly blew Otsutsuki away. Whoosh! High-density chakra erupted out, rotating at high speed like a deep-sea spring, and the restlessness of destruction filled the palm of Hachibi, and a mini Bijudama was clearly being formed. Mini Bijudama. Whoosh! Looking up, Kuroto saw the mini Bijudama in the Hachibi's hand darting straight forward, leaving a strong destructive aura in the void along the way, and the chakra that hasn't dissipated yet filled the surrounding environment. Boom! The deafening explosion echoed in the boundless sky like a thunderclap. The enormous, fiery mushroom cloud rose quickly, igniting the depths of the moon that had been stagnant water. The raging fire covered the sky and the earth, interpreting the meaning of the word destruction to the extreme. The area within several square kilometers seemed to have been enshrouded in a cage of fire. It was scorching hot. In an instant, 5 Tensigan weapons of Otsutsuki were destroyed. Is that Hachibi? Something's wrong. Otsutsuki stood up with difficulty, and without his eyes he could clearly feel that Hachibi was raging on the moon at a speed that defied common sense. He almost spat out blood uncontrollably, especially when he knew that the Tensigan weapons made by collecting countless Byakugan were destroyed in an instant by Dustless. He was even more hysterical. Hurry up and blast him and that beast into smithereens. Otsutsuki screamed with anger, and his sharp tone was filled with endless hatred and madness. Obviously, his hatred for Dustless has reached an unprecedented level. The operator of the remaining 10 Tensigan weapons ordered coldly, "Damn native! How dare you disturb my good thing? I will definitely make you pay the price." His amazing perception ability spread out again. Observing the surrounding environment, Otsutsuki gnashed his teeth and said hatefully in his heart, "A mere native from the earth dared to disrupt his plan." And he couldn't help but curse Dustless in his heart, especially when he noticed that Hachibi's godlike speed and strength had increased by at least 10 times in all aspects. That guy didn't give all his power to Hachibi, did he? Otsutsuki muttered to himself, and his face was pale. At this moment, Hachibi was too terrifying, its speed was fleeting, and its strength was even more terrifying. In fact, as he thought, Dustless really gave all the abilities of the glint-glinting fruit to Hachibi. In other words, this is equivalent to Hachibi eating the glint-glinting fruit, inheriting everything from Dustless. Boom. Boom. With a few harsh explosions, several more weapons made by Tensigan weapons were crushed by Hachibi, setting off a violent explosion. The already bumpy moon was affected by the explosion, and it was even more embarrassed. "I'm not willing." Sensing that another Tensigen weapon was destroyed, Otsutsuki was furious, and his whole body trembled with anger. The Byakugan weapons that were integrated with the Tensigen weapons were all obtained by slaughtering his clansmen, and they were all destroyed by Dustless. How could he be willing? In fact, Dustless also had a bad idea. There was no racial restriction in manipulating these Tensigen weapons, and he also had the mentality of robbing a few, so he didn't destroy all of them. The situation was one-sided, and Hachibi, who was given the glinting fruit by Dustless, was almost invincible, because Hachibi itself belonged to the monster level. The Otsutsuki clansmen were quickly slaughtered by Hachibi controlled by Dustless, and on the bumpy plains, almost all the bodies of the Otsutsuki clansmen, blood flowed like a river, and bones piled up like a mountain. The desolate moon was really quiet this time. Only Dustless, Otsutsuki Yuraku, and Otsutsuki Yumi were left, plus the controlled Hachibi. Looking at the corpses all over the ground, Wuchen took a deep breath and immediately smiled at Otsutsuki Yumi, who couldn't support himself. The corner of his mouth raised into a teasing smile. Being in the sea of blood filled with the strong smell of blood, there was no discomfort. Otsutsuki Tonari, goodbye. The Otsutsuki clan was completely destroyed, and Otsutsuki Tonari must have been killed in advance. At present, only Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Hagoromo can be left. As long as Otsutsuki Hagoromo is completely eliminated, and the bloodline of Otsutsuki can be collected. As for her, his eyes turned slightly, staring at the expressionless Otsutsuki Hagoromo. Dustless couldn't help but sigh that a woman's heart was like a needle in the sea. Before, because he wanted to use Hachibi to kill Otsutsuki, this woman fought with him, but now she has become indifferent, and Dustless can't figure out what she is thinking. Maybe she only has the clan in her heart. Shaking his head, Dustless was too lazy to think about it. Maybe when Otsutsuki Hagoromo used the Tensigen weapons to destroy the clan, her heart was completely dead. Chapter 94. The existence of Otsutsuki was to guard the Geto Mazo. Now that the Geto Mazo has been lost, the meaning of Otsutsuki's existence has also lost its value. The game ends here. Jumping down from the Hachibi's head, Dustless looked at Otsutsuki, who was paralyzed on the ground, as if he had lost his soul, and a contemptuous smile appeared on his thin lips. His eyelids drooped, and his eyes were cold. Although it's a lot different from the beginning of the plan, the destruction of your Otsutsuki clan. I was indeed in the calculation of my plan a long time ago. Looking at Otsutsuki, who looked like he had his bones pulled out, Dustless's breath was cold. This guy in front of him had the pure blood of the Otsutsuki clan, and it was absolutely comparable to Otsutsuki Iruo's. Boom! Dustless directly used Genjutsu to invade Otsutsuki's spiritual world, and put him on the ground. Only then did he feel relieved, and his tense spirit relaxed. Dustless's main purpose of coming to the moon was to obtain the blood of Otsutsuki. This guy in front of him had the purest blood, and he was undoubtedly the most suitable to be trained with the Geto Mazo. Damn Uchiha Madara. Thinking that the Geto Mazo was still in the hands of Madara, Dustless could only sigh silently. After integrating with Hashirama's cells, although he could control the Geto Mazo, it was unrealistic to take it away from Madara. It seems that only after Madara died of old age, he secretly took the Geto Mazo away. Anyway, collecting the bijou will be a matter of more than 10 years later. During this period, the Geto Mazo will be mine for the time being. Dustless's eyes lit up, and he thought secretly. He really didn't care about Uzumaki Nagato's dojutsu. Stop for me. At this moment, a cold voice sounded in his ears. Dustless was slightly stunned and turned his head. It was Otsutsuki Iruo, who was looking at him with a cold face. Seeing this, Dustless's face immediately filled with disdain. Otsutsuki is completely finished. Are you still going to hold on to me? Also, your Tensigen, including yourself, are just my trophies. Raising his eyebrows slightly, Wuchen spoke frankly, not caring about Otsutsuki Yuro's power. At the same time, he deliberately looked at Otsutsuki Yuro with a wolfish light in his eyes, sweeping unscrupulously. You. Looking at Dustless's eyes was looking at him aggressively. Otsutsuki's face suddenly turned pale. and his breathing became Abed, and the snow-capped peaks in front of him, swaying, and swaying in a thrilling arc. How about making a deal? Completely suppressing the anger in his heart, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes were filled with determination and reason. He looked at Wuchen and said calmly, "Deal ridiculous." Hearing this, Dustless directly sneered, and his tone changed sharply. "I have already said that your Otsutsuki clan, including you, is the object of my capture. You are not qualified to talk about conditions with me, let alone make a deal." Dustless didn't hide the sarcasm in his tone. Otsutsuki Iruo was already a fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered, a fish on the chopping board, and she had no ability to resist him. Even if he forcibly took the Tensigen, she couldn't do anything. The loser is not qualified to talk about conditions. Your purpose is just the Tensigen. With a slight frown, Otsutsuki Haguro said calmly, "Wuchen came all the way from the earth. It must be for the Tensigen. This is undeniable. What do you want to say?" Slightly stunned, Dustless looked at the indifferent Otsutsuki Iruo in surprise. Seeing that the latter's eyes were as clear as water, and not afraid of his gaze, a wrinkle flashed across his brows. He always felt that Otsutsuki Iruo's words just now contained a different meaning. "You are not a member of the Otsutsuki clan. Even if I transfer my Tensigen to you, you can't use all your strength, and without the Otsutsuki bloodline, the power of the Tensigen will be consumed several times more." Otsutsuki's Yuluo spoke with fervor and assurance. There was a hint of joy in his tone, as if he was sure that he could eat Wuchen. His eyes stared at Wuchen with a strange and unnatural look. But after thinking about Otsutsuki's current situation, the unnatural look in his eyes quickly turned into determination. Although this little girl is a bit exaggerated, this is the truth. Dustless lowered his head and thought. As Otsutsuki Iruo said, Uzumaki Nagato consumed a lot of energy because he couldn't completely control the Rinnegan. Because the Rinnegan wasn't originally Uzumaki Nagato's, it was extremely exhausting to control it, and it also consumed a lot of chakra. I have the ability to let you perfectly obtain the Otsutsuki bloodline. This is my bargaining chip with you. Otsutsuki Iruo seemed to see Dustless's heart moved, and said confidently, without any worry, "As long as Dustless wants to obtain the Tensigen, he will definitely agree. Let's hear it. What are your conditions?" Dustless didn't directly refuse Otsutsuki Iruo, but instead asked with interest. He wanted to see what the conditions of this big-breasted brainless woman were. "My condition is to marry me." Otsutsuki Iruo's pretty face showed embarrassment, but then she gritted her teeth and said it. Her eyes were full of determination. This was also the result of her careful consideration. Now that the Otsutsuki family has been completely destroyed by the Branch family, she is the only one left in the whole family. If she wants to continue the family, she will naturally choose an excellent spouse. Although Dustless has something to do with the destruction of the Otsutsuki family, in the end it was the Branch family that destroyed it. Although Otsutsuki Iruo is unhappy with Dustless, there is no other way, and there is only one Dustless on the moon. And to some extent, Dustless and Otsutsuki Iruo are indeed a match made in heaven. The two families have the same noble bloodline, and the future generations will naturally be dragons and phoenixes. However, Dustless's next sentence directly made her vomit blood. You want to eat the cradle?" Chapter 95. Otsutsuki Hagura's idea was naturally very simple, and not as complicated as Dustless. She simply wanted to breed excellent offspring with Dustless, so that the Otsutsuki bloodline wouldn't be interrupted and extinct. Therefore, she chose Dustless, the only dark horse, and nothing else was important to her. Moreover, the Ghetto Mazo and the man in front of her were inextricably linked. Maybe she could follow the vine to find the melon. And by the way, inquire about the whereabouts of the Ghetto Mazo and retrieve it. Otsutsuki Hagura didn't expect Dustless to be so insensible. Her beautiful forehead was full of blue veins. What made her want to vomit blood the most was that he was an old cow eating young grass. You have to agree even if you don't want to, otherwise, don't even think about getting the Otsutsuki bloodline. Suppressing the urge to bite Dustless to death in her heart, Otsutsuki Hagura took a deep breath and tried to stabilize her emotions, and then said in a deep voice, "The Otsutsuki bloodline is not an ordinary bloodline. I know what you are thinking. You want nothing more than to use the huge vitality to cultivate the Otsutsuki bloodline. I'm sorry, that's impossible." Otsutsuki Hagura's voice was resolute and unusually confident. She looked straight at Dustless, and her Tensigen was full of disdain and contempt. "You know the role of the Geto Mazo?" Dustless looked at the heroic Otsutsuki Hagura with a puzzled expression. His handsome face was full of surprise, and his lips squirmed. However, he seemed to think of something, and the words that were about to come out of his mouth were taken back. He secretly scolded himself for being stupid. How could the Otsutsuki clan, who had guarded the Geto Mazo for thousands of years, not understand the role of the Geto Mazo? The Otsutsuki clan probably knew the role and ability of the Geto Mazo better than anyone else. Why is it impossible? Dustless looked at the serious Otsutsuki Hagura with a puzzled expression. Uchiha Madara could use a piece of meat to cultivate a large number of Hashirama's cells, so why can't he cultivate Otsutsuki's cells? I'm not saying that the Geto Mazo can't cultivate Otsutsuki's body cells, but I can tell you that you don't want to use the Geto Mazo to integrate Otsutsuki's blood. Otsutsuki Haguro faintly glanced at Dustless and said with certainty. His pupils looked at Dustless without any evasion. He looked normal and natural, without any hint of deceit. This woman doesn't seem to be lying. The eyes are the window to the human soul. Dustless's sight has been locked on Otsutsuki's pupils. There was no movement, no evasiveness. It was as calm as a stagnant well without ripples. That's true. It's not like you can obtain the other party's abilities just by fusing with the other party's cells. Thinking of some unknown past, Dustless nodded secretly. This kind of problem related to genes, Dustless is really not good at. But one thing is certain, this is not an absolute problem. For example, Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito fused with Hashirama's cells provided by the Geto Mazo and obtained Mokuton. But Dustless also fused with Hashirama's cells. Except for feeling the power of nature, there is no such thing as Mokuton. Anyway, I won't lose anything. Looking at Otsutsuki Hagura's voluptuous figure, Dustless nodded secretly. Although he can be 100% sure that this woman has some unknown conspiracy, in short, Dustless has no reason to refuse. Especially after completely obtaining Otsutsuki's bloodline and opening the perfect Tensigen, Dustless has no reason to persuade himself not to accept Otsutsuki Hagura's conditions. In that case, I will reluctantly promise you, but I advise you not to do anything stupid, otherwise, even if I can't get the Tensigen and Otsutsuki's bloodline, I will destroy you. Dustless warned as the scarlet Mangekyo rotated and emitted an extremely dangerous light. As the saying goes, there is nothing wrong with being careful. In fact, Dustless has been prepared for this for a long time. When he obtained Hashirama's cells, Dustless used the transcription seal in advance to implant Izanagi in his left eye, setting it to be activated once he dies, which is equivalent to having a second life. Reluctantly promise me? Hearing this, the corners of Otsutsuki Haruo's mouth twitched fiercely, and his head was full of black lines. He resisted the strong impulse to beat Wuchen violently in his heart. He gritted his teeth and said, "At least you know your place. How are you going to let me get the Otsutsuki's bloodline?" Ignoring Otsutsuki Hagura's anger, Dustless smiled faintly, and then asked curiously. To be honest, he didn't think Otsutsuki Hagura had any means to do this kind of thing. Of course, through the Tensigen. Otsutsuki Hagura naturally saw Dustless's disapproving eyes, so he said confidently, "Don't forget, the Tensigen and Rinnegan are known as the eyes that can create and destroy the world. What you have seen before is the power of the Tensigen to destroy the world. I have never used the power of the Tensigen to create the world." The power of creation? Hearing this, Dustless was taken aback at first, and there was a brief blank in his mind, and then he nodded mechanically. What he understood before, and even now, was the Tensigen as the side of destroying everything. The so-called ability to create the world, he really hasn't seen it, let alone understand it. Indeed. Looking at Dustless's sluggish face, Otsutsuki Hagura obviously didn't think of the ability of the Tensigen in this aspect, and the corner of his mouth raised a smug smile. Both the Tensigen and Rinnegan are known as the dojutsu that can create and destroy the world, but they can create the world. Some of their abilities are absolutely incredible. This is my negligence. Dustless nodded slightly. He really didn't remember this. He only thought about the power of the Tensigen to destroy the world, and the preconceived idea of the Tensigen deceived Dustless's thoughts. I'm afraid the so-called power of creation is definitely not inferior to the Rinnegan ninjutsu. Looking at Otsutsuki Hagura expectantly, Dustless suddenly concluded in his heart, because Otsutsuki Hagura had no reason to lie to him. Chapter 96. The power of the Tensigen is beyond doubt. It can easily split the moon into two halves with a single blow, but this is the world destruction aspect. The ability to create a world. Dustless has never seen it before. Time flies, and 3 days have passed without him noticing. In the old secret room with filthy lights, the walls are old and decayed, revealing endless desolation. There are many murals left from ancient times on it, giving a feeling of mystery and strangeness. What is this place used for? It always feels weird. Looking at the strange environment with a slightly curious gaze, Dustless shrugged uncomfortably and muttered quite uncomfortably, at the same time. His eyes were full of vigilance and vigilance. The reason is that the environment in front of him is really strange. Looking up at the murals above the wall, although they have been decayed for countless years, the young and handsome face can still be clearly seen. His youthful and handsome appearance was as sharp as a knife, and his expression was meticulous. Even though it was just a mere mural, it was filled with a dignified sense of oppression, and might without being angry. What attracted Dustless's attention the most is that the handsome young man, there are clearly protruding hard objects similar to horns on both sides of his forehead, and there are strange black pearls floating behind him. This is the mural of Otsutsuki Himura. After staring at the figure on the mural above his head for a while, Dustless said in surprise. At the same time, he secretly sighed at the man who can be compared to the legendary Six Paths Sannin. Almost all the murals in this mysterious secret room have been decayed by time. Only the mural of Otsutsuki Himura seems to be full of endless magic, resisting the erosion of time. Even after thousands of years, it's still extraordinarily clear and well-defined. You are still afraid? Otsutsuki Himura is naturally not immortal. Although the unnaturalness in Dustless's eyes disappeared in a flash, she also noticed it, and immediately teased him. The feeling that Dustless has always given her has always been the kind of person who is not afraid of anything, and is extremely arrogant. There is always someone better. I never thought that I was invincible. Compared with the ancestor of the moon, Otsutsuki Himura, there is still a gap between us. Ignoring Otsutsuki Himura's teasing, Dustless said calmly. Not to mention that he hasn't obtained the Tensigen yet. Even if he does obtain the Tensigen, Dustless doesn't feel that he is the opponent of Otsutsuki Himura. After all, Otsutsuki Himura is also the direct descendant of Otsutsuki Kagaya, the ancestor of chakra. But then again, at this moment, Dustless's expression, Otsutsuki Himura, and Otsutsuki Himura's, Dustless, and Otsutsuki Himura was standing beside him. Raising his head and looking into Otsutsuki's eyes, Wu Chen's face was even more unnatural. Is there any doubt? Seeing Dustless looking at her in confusion and unnaturalness, Otsutsuki Himura didn't think much about it, but asked bluntly. Being on the moon, she doesn't have the complicated thoughts of human beings on the earth. She just simply says what she wants to say. It's okay. I'm just not used to this kind of scene. With the corners of his mouth twitching slightly, Dustless immediately retracted his gaze, closed his eyes gently, and shook his head lightly. This scene is like a patient about to undergo an operation. The patient is naturally Dustless himself, and the attending doctor is Otsutsuki Himura, so Dustless can't help but think of the tragic scene of the white mouse being experimented on. In that case, I'll start. Otsutsuki Himura nodded her white chin and looked at Dustless's strong and flat chest. Her pretty face was slightly red, and her eyes swept towards Dustless's face subconsciously. He doesn't look like a bad person. Listening to Wu Chen's steady breathing, Wu Chen seemed to be asleep without any vigilance. His expression was lazy, like a sleepy baby, which made Otsutsuki slightly stunned. For the first time he felt that this was Wu Chen's true face. Seeing this, Otsutsuki Hamura also calmed down, and the hesitation in her eyes disappeared. She put her white hand on Dustless's chest, and the green light was generous, rendering the entire space. The flowing light was generous, and Otsutsuki Hamura's arm seemed to be transparent red in an instant. Dark red blood spots constantly gushed out from her body, like the light of fireflies, constantly passing through her hand on Dustless's chest and into Dustless's body. What a strange feeling! Feeling the special blood that he had never had before integrated into his body, Dustless was slightly stunned. He felt the ancient power from Otsutsuki Hamura awakening and modifying the blood in his body. Opening his sleepy eyelids, Dustless slightly squinted, revealing a faint light. Looking at Otsutsuki Hamura, who was sweating because of changing his physique, Dustless's heart, which had been covered in dust for many years, gently loosened, and some strange warmth crossed his cold heart. It seems that she is serious. Closing his eyes again, Dustless's heart was complicated. Originally, Otsutsuki Hamura deliberately approached her, and wanted to find an opportunity to ask about the whereabouts of Geto Mazo, and then find an opportunity to kill him. Now it seems that Dustless thought too much. Let nature take its course, sighing in his heart. Dustless no longer worried about these trivial things, and couldn't help but sigh at the twists and turns of fate. He also knew that this kind of thing can't be forced. Abandoning the complicated emotions, Dustless carefully felt the changes in his body, and not wasting Otsutsuki Hamura's painstaking efforts, he cooperated with her. Time continued to pass. Dustless could clearly feel the changes in his body, and he could clearly perceive that Otsutsuki Hamura's bloodline and the Uchiha blood flowing in his body were slowly merging. In a fundamental sense, the Uchiha also belonged to the Otsutsuki bloodline, but after thousands of years of reproduction, the bloodline has long been different, and in the initial stage of the fusion, there were indeed signs of mutual rejection between the bloodlines, but with the use of a special power by Otsutsuki Hamura, the rejection between the bloodlines suddenly decreased to the extreme, and slowly merged. It should be the power of the Tensigen. With a flash of light in his heart, Dustless realized that only a large use of the power of the Tensigen can make Otsutsuki Hamura sweat like this. Chapter 97. At the same time, Wu Chen's pupils were also filled with intense pain. It was like being pricked by needles. Wu Chen could clearly feel that an extremely violent power filled his eyes as if it was going to tear his eyeballs apart. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Moreover, his pupils seemed to be bursting out of his eyes. A never-before-experienced itchiness spread out. This extremely terrifying eye power, it can't be wrong. Feeling the strange situation in his right eye, Dustless suddenly gasped. The terrifying eye power was far more powerful than Mangekyo, and even because of the excessive eye power, there was a feeling of uncontrollable. But what puzzled him was that only the eye power in his right eye went berserk, and there was no difference in his left eye. It's really strange. Feeling that his left eye was as calm as stagnant water, and there was no change, Dustless was full of doubts and puzzlement, because a few days ago, Otsutsuki Hagura had implanted high-purity Byakugan power in Dustless's eyes in advance. His right eye was violent like thunder, and his left eye was as quiet as stagnant water. Before that, Otsutsuki Hagura had implanted the power of Byakugan into Dustless's left and right eyes. How do you feel? You already have the same Otsutsuki bloodline as me. Wiping the beads of sweat from her temples, Otsutsuki Hagura's kind eyes were unusually dim at the moment, and her irregular Tensigen was very gray. Obviously, she spent a lot of energy and was mentally and physically exhausted. There were even some inconspicuous wrinkles in the corners of her eyes, which showed that this was also a jutsu that consumed vitality. This feeling is very good. Grabbing the dizzy Otsutsuki Hagura, Dustless looked at the wrinkles in the corners of her eyes, and his heart was complicated. Immediately, under Otsutsuki Hagura's surprised gaze, Dustless's thumb suddenly touched her eyebrows, emitting a bright and warm golden light. The golden light suddenly poured into Otsutsuki Hagura's mind, and the wrinkles on both sides of her eyes disappeared. You can't really control light, right? Feeling the warmth in her body that hadn't disappeared, Otsutsuki Hagura's eyes suddenly lit up, looking at Dustless in disbelief, and her tone was full of endless surprise. Barely covering his right eye, Dustless smiled faintly and gave an ambiguous answer. Although he had eaten the glint fruit and possessed most of the power of light, there was still a long way to go before he could become like sunlight. Freak. Otsutsuki Hagoromo shook his head, and his eyes flashed with frivolity. He didn't care about Dustless's answer, and immediately looked at Dustless covering his right eye and asked expectantly, "Is the Tensigen?" Looking nervously at Dustless, Otsutsuki Dustless was also her first attending patient. As a doctor, she naturally didn't want Dustless to fail in his evolution. Although the method is a bit rough, but, looking at Otsutsuki Hagoromo angrily, Dustless's left eye rolled back. Thinking of the previous heart-wrenching pain, he couldn't help but feel cold all over. Immediately, under the latter's hopeful gaze, he slowly removed the hand covering his right eye. The blue eyeball was clearly visible, and the irregular circles inside were clearly visible. It looked not much different from the eyes of ordinary humans. Compared with the Sharingan, which gives people a feeling of evil and darkness, this blue eye undoubtedly gives people a feeling of sunshine. It's the Tensigen. The only difference is that Dustless only has one Tensigen, and it's the right eye that caused a strong vibration. That's not right. Looking at the Tensigen in Dustless's right eye, Otsutsuki Hagoromo screamed, because Dustless's left eye is the Manjikyu Sharingan. You have high-purity Byakugan implanted in both eyes. Why only the right eye has the Tensigen? Looking at Dustless with doubt and hesitation, Otsutsuki Hagoromo was puzzled. God knows. Dustless shrugged, feeling the powerful eye power in his right eye slightly stunned. It's much stronger than the Manjikyu Sharingan. Although it's only the power of one eye, Dustless didn't feel any discomfort. You failure. Looking at Dustless's face full of joy and intoxicated by the power of the Tensigen, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's red lips slightly pouted, showing dissatisfaction, and yelled at Dustless with extreme annoyance. However, this guy is really strange. Judging from the degree of pupil power of his eye, it's already comparable to my two reincarnated eyes. Feeling the powerful eye power of the Tensigen in Dustless's right eye, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's heart was overwhelmed with horror. With only one eye's eye power, Dustless's Tensigen is on par with her eyes. If Dustless can open the Tensigen in both eyes, then it will be terrible. Although the Uchiha and the Otsutsuki clan have a relationship, thousands of years have passed, and the two clans have nothing to do with each other. Maybe the Otsutsuki bloodline you implanted in me can only support one Tensigen. After pondering for a while, Dustless explained, after all, he is not a member of the Otsutsuki clan, and the power of one eye is comparable to Hagoromo's eyes. He is already satisfied. That's true. On second thought, although he was dissatisfied with the failure of Dustless, Hagoromo was quickly relieved. After all, Dustless is not a member of the Otsutsuki clan. It's already good that he can open the Tensigen that only Otsutsuki can open, even if it's just one eye. Looking at Dustless, at this moment, the difference between Dustless's eyes is particularly big. The right eye is the Tensigen, which gives a feeling of sunshine, and the left eye is the Manjikyu Sharingan, which gives a feeling of extreme evil. In short, it looks extremely contradictory. It's good to find a partner to practice the Tensigen. Feeling the powerful eye power in his right eye, Dustless's eyes burst with a strong fighting spirit, and the target of this practice is naturally the system Ling. However, Dustless is not in a hurry to find Ling, to practice. Before that, he must master the ability and moves of the Tensigen. Looking at the Otsutsuki Haruo, Wuchan's mind became active. This daughter-in-law who sent herself to his door is an expert in Tensigen, far better than him, a rookie. It's not a bad idea to learn from her and cultivate their relationship. Chapter 98. Time flies unknowingly. Another 7 days pass quickly. Dustless has been on the moon for half a month. Although there are only 2 people on the moon, Dustless and Otsutsuki Hagoromo. As for Otsutsuki Hagoromo, she has been torn to pieces by Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who hates her to the extreme. The moon of the 2 is quite like a world of 2 people, but Dustless has been either practicing the ability of Tensigen or referring to some ancient ninjutsu left by the Otsutsuki family. It's worthy of being a clan that has been around since ancient times. It's really extraordinary. Looking at the wooden handbook in his hand, Dustless nodded in admiration. The content of it is naturally the unique insights of the ancestors of the Otsutsuki family on ninjutsu, and Dustless benefited a lot from it. The ancestors of the Otsutsuki family are the ancestors of chakra, and the use of chakra is naturally not something that you humans on Earth can understand. Otsutsuki Hagoromo glanced at Dustless with contempt in his eyes, and said seriously, "That's true." With a smile, Dustless can't deny that this is indeed an indisputable fact. The heritage of the Otsutsuki family is really terrible. When are you going to leave the moon? Her beautiful eyes looked at Wu Chen. After a few days of training, although Wu Chen's right Tensigen had not been completely used freely, and although some extreme moves could not be controlled, at least he could shrink it freely and switch it at will. Well, it should be soon. Looking at the blue planet in the distance, Dustless said calmly. As if talking to himself, his mind fell into an empty space, and immediately stared at the distant planet with a deep and unusual gaze. His whole body was full of cold air. Hearing this, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's voice sank, looking at Dustless with a complicated expression, and whispered softly, "People like you are really the source of chaos in the world." Looking at Dustless with resentment and dissatisfaction, Otsutsuki Hagoromo was not surprised at all. It was precisely because Dustless chose to pursue supreme power that he came to a desolate place like the moon. There's nothing wrong with pursuing power, just like your Otsutsuki family has been in decline for thousands of years, but you still can't escape the fate of destruction. If you have the power to absolutely crush Otsutsuki Yumi and his Tensigen weapon, your family won't perish. In fact, all living creatures are the same. Once they are immersed in the so-called peace, they will stop evolving and become satisfied with the current situation. Their hearts will also sink because of this, and they will yearn for the false peace. The world created by the Sage of the Six Realms is a false simulation, an unreal world. Dustless said calmly, ignoring Otsutsuki Yulua, whose face was getting uglier and uglier. It is because some people have such evil thoughts that the world is out of balance. You are the biggest destroyer of balance. Looking at Dustless angrily, Otsutsuki Yulua said with anger in his words, and he couldn't wait to beat up Dustless. As you said, it is because the power is too concentrated that the world is out of balance. But have you ever thought about why those who choose to concentrate power want to change the world? That's because the world is wrong. Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Yulua with a crazy idea in his heart. If he can fool this woman to be a thug on the earth, that would be great. The reason why Madara chose to steal the Gedomaza was because the world was completely desperate, and he chose to create a perfect world in the way of genjutsu. Putting aside his standpoint, Dustless actually agreed with this approach. People can't completely understand each other, and there is no strong bridge to communicate with people's hearts. Uchiha Madara's temperament changed greatly, so he used the power of the Jubi to release the infinite Tsukuyomi to the world. It's not like you don't know everything that has happened on the earth for thousands of years. I don't need to say this. Dustless just smiled faintly. Facts speak louder than words, and the current situation of the earth explains everything. Hearing this, Otsutsuki Yulua was silent, and he didn't need Dustless to say more. Why don't you come to the earth with me? Anyway, the Gedomazo is gone, and the Otsutsuki clan is gone, and your duty is over. Seeing Otsutsuki Yulua's heart wavering, Dustless took advantage of the opportunity to strike. You want me to live on the moon for the rest of my life? Don't even think about it. You spent so much time talking just to pull me to the earth to subvert the world with you. Seeing through Dustless's plot, Otsutsuki Yulua sneered with contempt, and it was obvious that he was too stupid and naive. With the corners of his mouth twitching fiercely, Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Yulua with a red face and trembled with anger. He rolled his eyes and said, "I'm telling the truth. Is it useful if I don't agree?" Staring at Dustless, Otsutsuki Yulua said sullenly, "Even if she doesn't agree, Dustless will choose to take her away by force. It's good that you can think like this." Dustless didn't deny it, because he did intend to do so. In the blue world, countless rays of light decorated the surrounding space, and the air was extraordinarily fresh, close to nature, like a paradise on earth, beautiful beyond compare. This is the world of the system. Wuchen looked coldly at the devastatingly beautiful girl with light makeup and no makeup in the distance. He said coldly, "I might as well tell you, Ling, or I'm here to make trouble for you today." After saying that, Dustless's eyes suddenly changed. His right eye turned into the Tensigen, and his left eye turned into the Scarlet Mangekyo Sharingan. Regardless of whether Ling agreed or not, chakra gushed out of his body, and the Tensigen surged with an unusually dangerous light. His whole personality was dangerous, especially the hurricane sweeping out from his hand, which was extremely cold. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The incomparably strong tornado suddenly roared towards Ling. The high-speed hurricane could crush all things in the world. Not to mention touching it, even if she was more than 100 feet away, she would feel a tingling sensation on her skin. Chapter 99. The giant tornado roared, and the strong hurricane swallowed the flowing air around it, like a black hole in the deep sea, constantly enlarging and increasing the scope of destruction. As it approached Ling, it became a behemoth of hundreds of meters long, sweeping the sky, rolling up endless cold wind, and the piercing air waves scattered in all directions. "It's useless." Ling faintly looked at the hurricane rushing towards her, and gently raised her hand, and her eyes suddenly changed. Under the surprised gaze of Dustless, her eyes suddenly turned purple, and a circle of black ripples surged out of her eyes. Her whole body also changed dramatically. Looking up, Ling, who originally had light makeup and no makeup, also became Uchiha Madara with a cold temperament and a domineering face. "This is interesting." Looking at Ling or Uchiha Madara, Dustless was slightly stunned. He still clearly remembered that Ling easily crushed him in the state of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Now it turned into the Rinnegan. In other words, it was also a recognition of Dustless's strength. "Not to mention harming me, this sort of attack is unable to even touch me." Ling who turned into Uchiha Madara, faintly stared at the tornado that wanted to crush him, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly, raising a contemptuous smile. Not only the appearance, but even the momentum was very similar to Uchiha Madara, looking at all living beings with contempt. The Rinnegan was slightly narrowed, staring at the huge tornado roaring. The pupils of Uchiha Madara suddenly widened, exuding strong fluctuations, and then the corner of his mouth swept a strange smile, and his hands were in front of him. So indifferently, he let the tornado swallow him. Boom! However, strangely, the moment the giant tornado touched the inside of Uchiha Madara, a powerful repulsive force suddenly spread out from the inside of the tornado, and directly collapsed. The powerful tornado was instantly smashed into dust. This is undoubtedly a repulsive force, but, seeing this, Dustless slightly frowned, and began to think in his mind. The main manifestation of the repulsive force of the Rinnegan is the aspect of Shinra Tensei, but the repulsive force of Shinra Tensei is centered on the body. This move is obviously different, just like Amaterasu. The place where the eyes focus immediately turns into a fire. Uchiha Madara doesn't seem to have this move. After pondering for a while, Dustless's frown deepened, and he could faintly see the Chuan character condense between his eyebrows, and subconsciously looked up at Ling's Uchiha Madara, with a puzzled face. Madara's face was full of mysteries. No, Wuchen's body was cold. He suddenly remembered the signature ninjutsu of Uchiha Madara after he opened the Rinnegan. His heart was extremely cold. At the same time, he felt that he was caught by the dangerous and sharp eyes of a falcon. Tomb Border Prison. Boom. At the place where Dustless stood, a super strong repulsive wave suddenly burst out. It swept across the sky like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves. In an instant, it spread to every corner of the sky. Everything that came in contact with it turned into ashes. It's a pity that I'm a step late, or that kid will be seriously injured. Seeing Dustless use elementalization to escape the attack of Tomb, Border Prison, the purple Rinnegan suddenly surged with waves of ripples, and a look of disappointment flashed across his face. Maybe it was only a second late. Dustless was seriously injured and fell to the ground. What a dangerous technique. Dustless, who escaped the attack of Tomb of Reincarnation, immediately pulled a distance away from Ling Er's Uchiha Madara. Looking at Madara with his hands in front of him, his heart twitched fiercely. Although this Uchiha Madara in front of him was transformed by Ling Er, there was no difference in strength between him and the Uchiha Madara in the real world. Sure enough, it's the dangerous technique of Tomb of Reincarnation. It's really dangerous. Dustless took a deep breath, and at the same time his hair stood up, and he looked at Uchiha Madara with vigilance. His spirit was tense, and he didn't dare to have any carelessness. Tomb of Reincarnation. This technique is almost invincible. Even if you know the principle, you can't completely guard against it. Just like Dustless, if he didn't have the ability to elementalize, I'm afraid he would have been eliminated. It's a pity that I don't have the Rinnegan nor the Six Paths Senjutsu. He couldn't help but sweat for himself. Dustless was speechless. There were only these two things that could deal with Luan Tomb, Border Prison, and he didn't have any of these two. Although the ability of elemental transformation could also ignore physical attacks, but unless he was in the state of elemental transformation, he could only passively take a beating. Super Shinra Tensei. Before Dustless recovered, a strong hurricane came head-on. And compared to the power and range of Tomb of Reincarnation, Border Prison, it was no worse. It's useless. Dustless looked at the wave of wind, and he chuckled, and turned into a golden light that went straight toward Madara. Super Shinra Tensei naturally passed through Dustless's body and couldn't cause any damage. You think you're invincible in elementalization? Well, today I'll let you understand that in the face of absolute power, any ability is futile. Madara sneered, and at the same time, a high-density black chakra appeared in his hand and floated to the sky. Chibaku Tensei. Are you kidding me? How can I let you succeed? Looking at the black ball floating in the sky, Dustless's Mangekyo Sharingan suddenly distorted violently, and after aiming at the black ball, he suddenly screamed. Amaterasu. Boom. The black high-density chakra ball suddenly burst, and the sky trembled violently, and the harsh explosion made people dizzy and deaf. Good opportunity. Tomb of Reincarnation. Border Prison. Boom. Attacked by the Tomb of Reincarnation, Dustless's upper body was instantly amputated, leaving only a pair of legs and feet, but in the next second, they were restored again. Obviously, Dustless was prepared in advance. Chapter 100. Seeing that Dustless's elementalization was ineffective against his attack, Madara couldn't help but frown. To be honest, this tricky ability is quite a headache. If I want to defeat this kid, I can only use some unusual means. The Rinnegan surged with a burst of cold light, and Madara's chakra burst out of his body, and the dark blue chakra quickly compressed and formed. Kensusunu. As Madara's voice fell, layers of dense chakra extended rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, a huge chakra energy body with Tengu armor was completely formed. It was Madara's ultimate body Kensusunu. The feeling of ancient vicissitudes floated out of the giant's body, as if silently telling that in front of the ultimate body Kensusunu, all things in the world are not worth mentioning. Well, the ultimate body Kensusunu. For me now, this technique is just full of flaws. The corner of his mouth raised a contemptuous smile. Looking at the ultimate body Kensusunu that almost covered the sky, Dustless had no fear, and not only that, his face was full of disdain. The Tensigan jumped sharply, and the golden light suddenly cut through the sky, extending infinitely, and instantly formed an extremely slender light sword. The chakra light sword that wanted to split the entire system world was extremely powerful. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Whoosh. The long, narrow, and wide golden light sword swept over, revealing its sharpness. The area covered by the sword seemed to have no end, and it was about to split the entire world apart. I can't stop it. Seeing the long and narrow golden lightsaber whistling towards them, Madara, who was transformed by Ling, was shocked, and a rare look of panic appeared in his eyes. Bastard! The Rinnegan surged with cold light, and Madara suddenly roared. Although the ultimate body Kinsusanoo has infinite power and can destroy the world, its speed is its biggest weakness. In the face of the sweeping golden light sword, it can only passively take a beating. Poochie! The long and narrow golden light passed through the waist of the ultimate body Kinsusanoo. Looking up, Kinsusanoo's waist was dotted with a faint golden light. The giant that covered the sky suddenly collapsed and turned into two parts. Looking up, it was Kinsusanoo that was cut in half by Dustless. Good boy, your strength has really improved. Madara's face was extremely ugly. Since the ultimate body Kinsusanoo came out, it was the first time that it was so easily crushed, as fragile as a bug. Wu Chen was abnormally indifferent. His eyes were as calm as an ancient well, without any ripples. Not to mention the ultimate form of Susanoo. Even if the entire world is in front of the Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion, it would be as weak as a thin paper. Looking at the ultimate body Kinsusanoo that was cut in half, Dustless didn't care, and then looked at Madara indifferently. After all, the Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion can even split the moon in two, let alone the ultimate body Kinsusanoo. It's a good eye. Staring at the Tensigan in Dustless's right eye, the system Ling, transformed into Uchiha Madara praised, and then his eyes suddenly became cold, and Kinsusanoo appeared again. The only difference is that the two Susanoo were facing the sky, forming hand seals with Madara, and the Rinnegan was emitting extremely powerful eye power. Tensigan Earthquake Star. As Madara's voice fell, the sky suddenly darkened, and the dark shadow covered the light. Looking up, he saw an unprecedented giant meteorite with a diameter of 15 kilometers falling from the sky. Looking up slightly, Dustless looked at the meteorite that slowed down, and his brows wrinkled unconsciously. What is this guy's intention? Looking at Ling, transformed into Madara, Dustless's eyes were full of doubts. There is no doubt that the scale of the Tensigan Earthquake Star is terrifying, but it also varies from person to person. This kind of ninjutsu has no effect on Dustless at all. Obviously, there is an unspeakable purpose. In the world of ninjas, strength is important, but sometimes IQ can also change the situation. But since you're here, I'll take it one by one. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The high-speed rotating hurricane raged out, and the airwaves were as cold as a blade. Due to Dustless's continuous transmission of chakra, the giant tornado continued to expand and extend. The momentum was extremely fierce, and the area covered was almost impossible to estimate. Then he flew straight towards the falling meteorite. Boom, boom, boom. At the center of the meteorite, which had a diameter of 15 kilometers, a huge pit was immediately drilled out. The extraordinarily powerful hurricane continued to expand madly towards the interior of the meteorite. Huge crushed rocks were constantly falling from the sky. It was as if the sky was raining meteorites, which was particularly spectacular. The meteorite rain became more and more intense until finally, the clouds were cleared, and the sky was completely restored. I said, although this kind of technique is extremely challenging to the visual nerves, but suddenly looking up, a giant black high-density chakra ball roared, and Dustless's voice stopped abruptly. That black ball was the Bijudama. Looking at the oncoming giant black Bijudama, Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely, and looking up, he could see the nine-tailed orange monster. This is the world inside the system, and Madara is also transformed by Ling, not to mention the Bijudama. I'm afraid that even the Ghetto Mazo can be created. With a pale face, Dustless realized that the world inside the system had nothing to do with the outside world, and Madara's peak strength was preserved. After feeling the destructive power of the Kyuubi's Bijudama, Dustless didn't have any intention of retreating. Instead, A green chakra floated all over his body. It was the Tensigen chakra mode. In this state, Dustless can easily use the truth-seeking ball. Similar to the Kyuubi's chakra mode of Naruto and Zito, which is characterized by the green chakra covering the whole body. In this mode, he can use beads similar to the truth-seeking ball to attack and defend. The Kyuubi's Bijidama is powerful, but there's no need to run. Chapter 101. The giant Bijidama rushing towards Madara seemed to destroy the world, and the black energy ball seemed to come from the underworld. It was untouchable, and even the airwaves flowing in the air made a detour. What a strange pattern! Madara, who was transformed by Ling, looked at Dustless, who was wrapped in the green chakra pattern, and for a while he didn't recover, and his face was full of curiosity. Especially the Tensigen in Dustless's right eye, which made him particularly curious. An eye comparable to the Rinnegan. This is really beyond his scope of knowledge. The world is so big, nothing is too strange. Madara smiled faintly, looking at Dustless. The contempt in his eyes finally disappeared, and was replaced with unprecedented caution. Although Dustless only has one Tensigen, the move that cut the ultimate body in half in an instant shows that he has the ability to threaten Madara. This kid is really not ordinary. The Rinnegan surged with endless cold light, looking at Dustless, who didn't dodge the Kyuubi's Bijidama. Madara's eyes flashed with curiosity. He could feel that the green beads floating around Dustless were extraordinary. It seems similar to the truth-seeking ball. After staring for a while, Madara's face showed a flash of understanding. Boom, boom, boom. At the moment of contact with Dustless, the Bijidama suddenly burst, setting off a strong shock wave, and the destructive airwaves pressed down on Dustless's survival space. The green light on his body instantly formed a semicircular space wrapped around Dustless, allowing Dustless to safely escape the destruction of the Bijidama. The Kyuubi is the strongest among the Bijou, and there is no doubt about his strength. If it weren't for the Sharingan being the natural enemy of the Bijou, I'm afraid not many people would dare to confront him head-on. Insignificant skill. Dustless, who was inside the defensive barrier, felt the impact of the Bijou's explosion, and constantly crushed the barrier formed by the green beads, but he just shook his head indifferently without the slightest worry. From beginning to end, he had maintained an unprecedented calmness. After a long while, the violent explosion stopped completely. Dustless was about to remove the defensive barrier, when the ground in front of him suddenly shook violently. It was as if there was an earthquake, and the tremors didn't stop. Removing the defense, he suddenly saw the Kyuubi rushing over. Madara stood on top of his head indifferently. It was obvious that the Kyuubi's eyes had turned scarlet. A mere 9 tails is nothing. Do you think I can't do anything to 9 tails? Stupid. Looking at the 9-tailed beast's huge body, Dustless sneered. At the same time, a terrifying killing intent flashed across his face. Spirit communication technique. Ayo ayo ayo. A deafening roar burst out. Looking up, it was a huge stone statue summoned by Dustless. Its size was larger than Kyuubi's, and its appearance was fierce. In terms of size and appearance, it was very similar to the old Otsutsuki Hamura. Whoosh! Boom! Seeing the stone statue of Otsutsuki Hamura blocking in front of Wu Chun, Kyuubi shot out a small Bijidama from his mouth, breaking the stone statue into pieces, but in the next second, it was restored again. It can recover, what a strange ability. Uchiha Madara, who was on the Kyuubi's head, frowned slightly as he looked at the tomo on the chest of the statue. He lowered his head, and his eyes were as clear as a mirror. Don't look at everything with an omniscient expression. In fact, there are many things you don't know. The Mangekyo in his left eye flashed with a cold light, and the pupil suddenly enlarged. There were many thin lines in the eyeball like a spider web, and there was a faint black flame. Uchiha Madara gave people a very uncomfortable feeling. There was no other reason than Uchiha Madara's omniscient eyes made Dustless particularly angry, even if the Uchiha Madara in front of him was just the system's consciousness Ling, Amaterasu. Whoosh! Uchiha Madara, who was on the Kyuubi's head, was suddenly engulfed in black flames. However, Madara didn't seem to feel anything. He let the flames burn his body, but he was still safe and sound. This kind of ordinary ninjutsu is useless to me. Madara shook his head and cast a look of pity and contempt at Dustless, and immediately his whole body was like a black hole, completely absorbing Dustless's Amaterasu. Seeing this, Dustless didn't have any surprise. This is one of the manifestations of the Rinnegan's divine power. The reverse circulation of the chakra in the body and the opponent in front of him. What about this? The golden light roared up, and immediately the golden light bullets fell mercilessly. The number was too dense to estimate. Looking up, one could only see the golden light covering the sky. Senjutsu. Yasakani no Magatama. Unlike the simple Yasakani no Magatama, after the fusion of the Senjutsu chakra, the range of the Yasakani no Magatama was greatly improved. Naive to the extreme, seeing the countless golden light bullets whizzing towards him and nine-tailed, the biting cold of the bullets seemed to want to hit him out of a sieve. At that moment, he just smiled indifferently. Tomb of Reincarnation. Border Prison. Boom! At the center of the falling golden light bullets, a shockwave suddenly exploded, destroying all of the light bullets. Of course, there were some that slipped through, but they were still forced to change their trajectories by the repulsive force, and all of them hit the ground around them, turning the surface of the ground into a sieve-like beehive. Uchiha Madara and the Kyuubi he controlled were safe. This is the horror of Tomb of Reincarnation. Border Prison. Not only does it have destructive attack power, but it can also defend, and even destroy any ninjutsu. So far, there are only a few ninjutsu that can defend against the repulsive force. And the most terrible thing about Tomb of Reincarnation is that just like Amaterasu, the focus of the eyes is the target of the attack, and there is no complete defense. Chapter 102. Dustless Side. The Rinnegan is actually similar to the Mangekyo Sharingan. After opening it, some special jutsu will be born, such as Uchiha Madara's Tomb of Reincarnation Border Prison, and Uchiha Sasuke's Heavenly Hand Power, a jutsu that makes others envious. Seeing that his senjutsu, Yasakani no Magatama, was completely broken, Wuxia was full of praise. He looked at Madara's Rinnegan with a fiery gaze. He didn't hide the greed in his eyes. Tomb of Reincarnation. Border Prison was an invincible technique. If Wuxia said that he didn't desire it, it would be pure nonsense. Well done, Linger. Looking at Ling, who turned into Madara, Dustless couldn't help but sigh at the system's defiance. Just like Uzumaki Nagato, who transplanted Madara's Rinnegan, didn't know the existence of some ninjutsu, let alone use it perfectly. I am the god of creation in the system's world, and everything in the world can be changed according to my will. Ling turned into Uchiha Madara and said. His tone was extremely calm, as if he was narrating a trivial matter. His heart was like stagnant water without any ripples. His whole person felt like a rock, without any emotion, pretending to be a ghost. Hearing this, Dustless just curled his lips. Looking at Madara, who was standing indifferently, Dustless felt even more uncomfortable. He always felt that Madara's tone was arrogant. Looking up slightly, Dustless looked at Madara, who was looking down at him from the top of the Kyuubi's head. His eyes were cold and murderous. He slowly raised his right arm and faced Madara, who was on the Kyuubi's head. Come down. Boom. A strong repulsive force came out of Dustless's palm, crossing layers of space, and swept straight toward Madara. Feeling the repulsive force coming from the front, Madara's face suddenly changed, as if he was hit by a heavy punch, and fell from the Kyuubi's head. Repulsion? Madara, who fell to the ground, stared at Dustless's Tensigen, because his Mangekyo didn't have such an ability. There was no doubt that it was the Blue Eyes ability that he had never seen before. This is nothing. I'll show you something even more interesting. If you have the guts, use the Tomb of Reincarnation to destroy this technique as well. The corners of Dustless's mouth curled up in a complacent arc. Soon after, his expression suddenly turned cold. The chakra around his body swelled and exploded. He raised his arm high, surrounded by a dazzling golden light. It faintly emitted a terrifying sharpness that could cut through all things. Golden Will reincarnation. As Dustless's voice fell, it was as if the horn of doomsday had been blown. The golden light expanded and extended without limit, and the pitch-black shadow almost covered the entire system world. The world was faintly filled with signs of collapse, and there were signs that it was going to split into two. If you're hit, you'll die. Madara's handsome face was no longer as calm as before. He was unusually gloomy and heavy. This technique can cut the ultimate body can Susanoo like a cabbage. I'm afraid that anyone who gets hit by it will end up in a tragic end. Boom. 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 On the other side, the Kyuubi was also fighting with the stone statue of Otsutsuki Hamura. The battle between the two giants naturally shook the earth, and the whole ground shook like thunder. The stone statue of Otsutsuki Hamura temporarily had the upper hand. Although it was crushed by the Kyuubi from time to time, as long as Dustless, the owner of the Tensigen, didn't fail, the stone statue of Otsutsuki Hamura wouldn't be defeated. It could be restored and restored without limit. It could completely consume the Kyuubi, the largest collection of chakra. Whoosh! Suddenly, the golden lightsaber poured down, and the incomparably sharp blade swallowed Madara in an instant, destroying and annihilating the endless earth. Crack! 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 Unable to bear the unprecedented impact of the huge force, the ground suddenly burst open, and a narrow crack hundreds of kilometers long with almost no end was exposed to the eyes, completely dividing the whole earth into two sides. Oh, it seems that I didn't control it well. If it was Hagoromo, I'm afraid he would have been killed. Shaking his head, Dustless's eyes flashed with disappointment. He could feel that Madara wasn't killed. Although his breath was weak, it was still not enough to send him to the sky. The smoke and dust on the ground combined with the long and narrow crack of hundreds of kilometers was extraordinarily terrifying and full of depression, giving people a sense of despair at the dusk of the end of the world. Yes, that strange eye is really powerful, no worse than the Rinnegan. A cold voice drifted through the heavy smoke, falling into Dustless's ears, but it actually had a different meaning. Looking up slightly, through the endless smoke and dust, he could see the vague outline of a young girl. It was the cold and indifferent face of the system's consciousness, Ling who had restored her own appearance. Her eyes swept past Dustless's body and Ling immediately nodded. Her tone suddenly raised a little, and whispered, "Today is the first time you defeated a character in the system. Although it's a bit sloppy, it's barely okay." Barely okay. Hearing this, Wu Chen's mouth suddenly twitched. His face suddenly turned black, and he rolled his eyes. He said angrily, "If I can reach your ideal realm, even if Otsutsuki Kagaya is resurrected now, she can only watch me surpass her." Wu Chen pretended to be furious and stared at Ling Er. Wu Chen was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. This guy was purely here to attack people. Perhaps if he reached Ling Er's ideal state, not to mention this world in front of him, he was afraid that he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the two dimensions. Forget it, since you already have the strength to defeat the character I created. I will also let you understand the essence of the system. The tone suddenly changed and Ling said directly, her eyes were faintly full of light, and at the same time, her beautiful eyes turned around Dustless, flashing the same light from time to time. "I should have told you that the essence of the system is plunder, and the meaning is also plunder. You can defeat any character I created. In fact, you can take everything from them." Chapter 103. Dustless actually had a lot of questions about the system in his heart, but he didn't have free time these days. Now that Ling said this, he suddenly remembered. That is to say, the system is not so useless. Dustless's eyes were like waking up from a dream. He always thought that the system only had a lottery function, but now it seems that he thought too much. Then I just defeated Uchiha Madara. Did I get his Rinnegan? Looking at Ling expectantly, Dustless's eyes were full of hope and yearning. If what Ling said is true, he will get everything of Uchiha Madara, including Rinnegan and Mokuton. You didn't kill me completely just now. Blinking her shining eyes, Ling was very ruthless and straightforward to hit Dustless. Her words revealed a rare teasing and ridicule, giving people a feeling of friendliness. That's because you didn't tell me that you were going to kill me, otherwise, how can I tolerate you? The corners of his mouth suddenly twitched, and he almost spat out blood. Wuchen was so angry that he scolded in his heart. He looked at Ling who looked indifferent. His resentment index was off the charts. You can't cheat people like this. It's because you never asked. Ignoring Dustless's dissatisfaction directly, Ling didn't hesitate to add fuel to the fire. After seeing Dustless's angry eyes, she whispered, "The facts are not as simple as you think. It's okay to take the opponent's ability, but there is also a limit. If you are defeated by the opponent, you will also pay a heavy price, and this price is your life." Staring at Dustless, who was about to complain, Ling was very serious. Her spotless white face was full of caution, and her tone was a lot more severe. "Does this mean that if I'm defeated, I'll die completely?" Taking a deep breath, Dustless's eyes were a lot ugly. In other words, if he blindly challenges Ling it is very likely that he will die completely. This is the essence of the system's plunder. If you defeat the opponent, you will get everything of the opponent. If you fail, you will also be ruthlessly plundered by the system. In other words, Dustless can't casually challenge Ling, from now on, the price of failure is simply unbearable. "So, are you sure you still want to challenge me now?" Ling stared at Wuchen with interest and continued to speak softly. Her tone was somewhat filled with schadenfreude. "Of course." Dustless was about to say that of course he wants to challenge Madara, but Linger's words suddenly dispelled Dustless's idea. Uchiha Madara wasn't in his strongest state just now. If you choose to practice next, you will face the Jubi's Jinchuriki at his peak. Hearing this, Wuchen swallowed back the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Not to mention how uncomfortable it was. His pupils kept changing back and forth, and his shining eyes dimmed again. Until now, Dustless has no way to restrain Luan Mu. He can only rely on his elemental transformation to defend himself. If he challenges Uchiha Madara, he can only take a beating. Uchiha Madara with the Jubi is definitely several times stronger than when he was in his pure Rinnegan. "Let's fight Brother Uchiha first." Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. Although the one who challenged Sasuke was definitely Uchiha Sasuke, it was obvious that there was still a big gap between him and Jubi's Jinchuriki Uchiha Madara. Even if he got the gift of Rakuto and opened 6 Tomo Rinnegan, Dust was confident that he could take him down. In fact, what attracts Dustless the most is not Uchiha Sasuke's ability. The 6 Tomo Rinnegan is very tempting, but it belongs to someone else from the beginning to the end. What concerns Dustless the most is that defeating Uchiha Sasuke means that he can take everything from him, including his identity as Indra's reincarnation. It means that after Dustless integrates with Hashirama or Uzumaki Naruto's chakra, he can open his own Rinnegan. Although Uchiha Madara is also Indra's reincarnation, Dustless still chose to pinch Uchiha Sasuke. After Uchiha Sasuke received the gift of the Rakuto, he opened the 6 Tomo Rinnegan, and so did Uzumaki Naruto. But even so, facing the Jubi's Jinchuriki, Uchiha Madara, they were still defeated. If it wasn't for Black Zetsu's sneak attack on Uchiha Madara, I'm afraid that even if Uchiha Sasuke could really hit him, he would end up losing 800 of his own men. Therefore, even if Uchiha Sasuke used the 6 Tomo Sharingan, he would still be defeated by Uchiha Madara. Have you thought about it? Looking at Dustless's eyes, Linger asked indifferently. We'll talk about it later, that's all for today. Hearing this, Dustless shook his head. He can train Uchiha Sasuke at any time, but Uchiha Madara's plan on the earth will be implemented soon, and some things need to be arranged in advance. The flames of the Third Shinobi World War spread all over the world. Although the Cloud Village was attacked by Dustless, it didn't reach the extent of hurting them, so they chose to continue fighting against the Rock Village. As for the attack by Dustless, they chose to remain silent and pretend that nothing happened, but secretly sent people to search for Dustless's traces. Seeing is believing, this is what the 6 Paths Sunin created. I don't need to add any details. On the quiet plains, countless ninjas could be seen killing each other. The two sides were like blood enemies, mercilessly killing each other. Dustless smiled and looked at the silver-haired, curvy girl beside him, and breathed a sigh of relief. He spent a lot of effort to deceive this super fighter from the moon, and even signed a lot of unequal treaties. Otsutsuki Hagura bit his thin lips and chose to be silent. Indeed, as Dustless said, chakra is not a bridge to communicate with each other, but the root of killing each other. If there was no so-called chakra, these people would never be as unscrupulous as they are now. Unconsciously, Otsutsuki Hagura's heart also quietly changed. You want to see the Ghetto Mazo? I'll take you to see it now. Chapter 104. In the dark and damp depths of the underground, the environment was so dark that one couldn't even see one's own fingers. It was filled with the smell of decay. The endless darkness was full of oppression, causing goosebumps to rise all over one's body. The most terrifying thing was that in the dark environment, from time to time, cold purple eyes would flash, which was especially frightening. The dark surroundings were silent, but there was a faint reflection of a sharp edge that could cut everything. The sharp-eyed people could vaguely see the old man holding a black scythe. His skin was dry, and the cold light was really reflected from his scythe. This old man was Uchiha Madara, and the man and woman in front of him were quite extraordinary. Just by looking at their appearance, one could tell that they were a perfect match. Dustless, aren't you going to introduce them? Madara looked up at Dustless and Otsutsuki Haguro in front of him, nodded slightly, and immediately raised the corner of his mouth into a smile. His sunken eyes rested on Haguro, and his old eyes flashed with deep confusion as he motioned to Dustless. He didn't know why, but Uchiha Madara felt that Otsutsuki Hagoromo was particularly strange, and Madara couldn't explain it clearly. This young girl gives me a strange feeling, but I always have a feeling of déjà vu. Looking at Haguro from the corner of his eyes, Madara's eyes were full of deep confusion. He had never seen the girl in front of him in his life, because they were from the same era, and there was a generation gap. Her name is Haguro, and she will be my subordinate from now on. Dustless smiled faintly, and his clear black eyes were full of calmness. Looking at Madara's old eyes, Dustless explained calmly. Madara naturally knew the surname Otsutsuki, and there couldn't be such a coincidence in the world. Dustless casually found a subordinate named Otsutsuki. Yes. Madara couldn't find any information about Haguro in his life's memory, so he had to nod, thinking that the feeling of déjà vu just now was a simple illusion. Ordinary people would be scared half to death if they saw him like this, but the girl in front of him was as calm as stagnant water. This was enough to prove how extraordinary she was. The Tenseigan in Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes also turned into a pair of dull black eyes because of Dustless's reminder. Although it's not clear whether Madara knows about the Tenseigan or not, it's better to be safe than sorry. Damn thief. At this moment, Otsutsuki's face was calm, but his heart was filled with anger. If it weren't for her and Dustless's agreement in advance, she would have definitely used the Golden Wheel reincarnation explosion to completely cut Madara in two. Without Uchiha Madara, the Ghetto Mazo would not have been lost, and the Otsutsuki branch family and the main family would not have run counter to each other. And the branch family would not have awakened the Tenseigan and destroyed the main family because of differences in opinion. The source of the destruction of the Otsutsuki clan is naturally Uchiha Madara, who stole the Ghetto Mazo. But then again, frowning slightly, Dustless, who had already learned about the Third Shinobi World War, couldn't help but have doubts in his heart. The so-called plot history was twisted into pieces by him, the plot destroyer. Whether Uchiha Obito can still become Madara's subordinate as before, Dustless doesn't know, but it's not something he can worry about. For the scheming Uchiha Madara, it doesn't matter if there are no conditions. What matters is whether he has the determination to do it. Even if there are no conditions, he can create perfect conditions. This is what Dustless admires the most about this old guy. He has no choice. It seems that he misread Dustless's thoughts. Madara's dry mouth raised with a domineering smile. Although it looked strange and particularly scary, it was extremely strong. Glancing at Madara, Dustless ridiculed him. Although the Uchiha Madara he fought before was transformed by Ling, all aspects were almost the same. Even if Madara is really resurrected now, Dustless is confident that he can fight against him. Compared to Madara, who didn't know anything about him, after 2 consecutive practice sessions, Wuxia already knew everything about him. As long as the little girl named Rin is killed by Kakashi, and Uchiha Obito sees this scene, I think he will completely fall into darkness and step into hell. As if he was sure that Uchiha Obito will fall into endless darkness, Madara's eyes were extremely calm, and the light of wisdom seemed to pass through the layers of time and space to see the scene of Uchiha Obito surrendering to him. Madara's plan is indeed perfect. His series of plans made Obito despair of reality. Facing the loss of his true love, he chose to use Genjutsu to hope to see Rin. This shows the extent of Obito's fall into darkness. However, there are always some unexpected things that happen. You should go with Zetsu. Frowning slightly, Madara still chose a two-handed insurance. As the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes. There is no absolute plan, and any plan designed by people has loopholes that people don't pay attention to. He can see through this. The existence of Dustless and Obito is to help him perfect those loopholes. That's not a problem. Dustless didn't refuse. After all, he and Madara are now allies in the trenches. Rejecting Madara's proposal, Dustless doesn't expect Madara to fall out with him over this small issue. But at this stage, there is no need to contradict Madara, because the cooperation in front of him is a win-win situation. Even if Madara's strength has entered this realm, his role is negligible, even negligible, but the two sides have the same essential purpose. They can go together to plan behind the scenes, and then conspire against the whole world. Moreover, staying with Madara will allow him to enter the water first, and once the Jubi is resurrected in the future, he will be the first to pick the fruit of victory. Chapter 105. 7 days later, in the lush green forest, several agile black shadows could be seen shuttling through the forest. Their agile movements were as skillful as primates, and their speed was extremely fast. Often, in the blink of an eye, they would appear in another place. That guy really deserves to die. The two figures were none other than Dustless and Otsutsuki Haruo. As for Zetsu, he obediently laid on the ground and moved in stealth. He tactfully pulled away from Dustless and Otsutsuki Haruo. These two super-dimensional monsters were not something he could touch. Although Dustless didn't mention anything about Otsutsuki Dustless's strength, anyone with half a brain can clearly imagine what kind of person Uchiha Dustless is. It is absolutely impossible for him to find a woman with mediocre strength to be his only subordinate. She must be at least on the same level as the Kage-level ninja of the various villages. Therefore, he was able to see through this point. Dustless didn't even need to make a move. That subordinate of his could easily crush him. You mean Uchiha Madara? Apart from Dustless, only Uchiha Madara can make Otsutsuki gnash his teeth. As the culprit behind the destruction of the Otsutsuki clan, it's not hard to imagine how much hatred he has for her. Do I need you to tell me that? Staring at Dustless, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's pretty face was covered with frost. Although Otsutsuki was destroyed in the internal strife of the clan, Uchiha Madara was the one who directly caused the internal strife. How could she easily let him off? Don't be careless. That old man isn't as weak as you think. Seeing the murderous look on Otsutsuki's face, Dustless immediately frowned and warned. Although he defeated Uchiha Madara in the system's world, whether he can defeat this Uchiha Madara in front of him is ambiguous. After all, Madara is not alone. Although he is now completely dead, Dustless believes that he must have some unknown cards. I naturally know that he is extraordinary. He is the first person to open the Rinnegan the day after tomorrow. How can he be an ordinary person? Otsutsuki Haguro said softly. He didn't reject Dustless as much as before. The first person who opened Rinnegan was naturally the legendary goddess Otsutsuki Kagaya. And the second person was Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who was born with Rinnegan. Until now, thousands of years later, Uchiha Madara was the first to open the Rinnegan, which explained everything. But that guy is really crazy. The 10-tailed beast has the power to destroy heaven and earth. Isn't he worried that his strength isn't enough to suppress the 10-tailed beast? Thinking of the ghetto mazo he just saw in the depths of the ground, Otsutsuki Haguro took a deep breath and couldn't help but sweat for Madara's madness and so-called plan. At the same time, Otsutsuki Haguro was also surprised by Madara's wisdom and the shrewdness of all sides. Madara was able to calculate all the unfavorable factors half a century ago, and then remove the dregs in the plan one by one. This kind of terrifying IQ, everyone has to bow down to him. However, if Dustless knew Otsutsuki Haguro's thoughts, he would not hesitate to despise him loudly. Compared with Black Zetsu, who has played with the world for thousands of years, Uchiha Madara is just a grain of sand, not worth mentioning. Uchiha Madara is indeed a difficult enemy to deal with. For Uchiha Madara, Dustless also has a respectful attitude. After all, this guy's ability and strength are obvious to all. If it weren't for the existence of the system, I'm afraid that Dustless can't catch up with him, even if he worked hard for 100 years. Perhaps there is no need to chase Uchiha Madara. As long as Dustless is willing to sink, Uchiha Madara will be killed by Uchiha Itachi in the future. Don't talk about him. You are also not a good thing. Otsutsuki Haguro suddenly turned to Dustless and scolded. Although the eyes of Otsutsuki Haguro in front of him have been replaced with normal human eyes, her temperament has not changed. She is still so beautiful, giving people the feeling of an ice goddess. Hearing this, Dustless was speechless. Didn't you attack Uchiha Madara with your mouth? How come it changed to me? I didn't say that I am a gentleman. Dustless smiled indifferently. For these good and bad things it doesn't matter. If being a good person can make his strength continue to grow, then he definitely doesn't mind changing his face. If it doesn't work, then it's the opposite. Absolute. Looking through the dense forest, Dustless's eyes suddenly became awe-inspiring, and the environment in front of him was clear. Dustless-sama. Hearing Dustless calling his name, White Zetsu dared to approach Dustless. He was created by Uchiha Madara, but facing a strong person like Dustless, he still felt fear from the depths of his soul. This has nothing to do with Madara's creation. Is the little girl named Noera Rin really taken away by the mist? Frowning slightly, Dustless asked indifferently. He didn't expect that the previous lesson he taught the mist not only didn't make them afraid, but also made them work even harder. The Kanushi Bridge is a confrontation between Konoha and the Rock. Now that the Mist people are intervening, it shows that they still hold a grudge against Dustless and the Sannin. It's really troublesome. Let me help them. A strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Naturally, he sentenced Noera Rin to death in his heart. As for the so-called guilt, Wuxia has never felt it. The world of shinobi is so cruel. Unknowingly, you will become a pawn of others. If you don't keep up with the times, you can only go with the flow. Even if you want to be a pawn, you will be directly obliterated. Dustless naturally understood why the mist took Noera Rin. They want to seal the Sanbai in her body, and then return to Konoha to destroy Konoha's ninja village. Idiot, this is exactly what I want. Dustless's eyes were cold, and he sneered again and again. The mist's approach was exactly what he wanted. Chapter 106. The Mist Village was isolated on the island, and all kinds of resources were extremely scarce. Compared to Konoha, the richest country on the mainland, it was impossible for them not to be jealous of Konoha. Especially after the last sneak attack on Konoha's Sannin, and Dustless failed, but after losing a few rice, their hatred for Konoha's ninja village went up a level. Now that the war between the Rock and Konoha was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, how could the mist let it go? In the dark and bottomless cave, the environment was so dark that one could not even see one's own fingers. The surrounding yellowish rock walls were filled with traces of the passage of time. The ground was full of loose particles, and the thick congealed soil was piled up everywhere. Obviously, no one had been here for a long time. However, now the dirty lights were reflected on the walls, and in the endless dark cave, There was a gloomy laughter from time to time. Through the reflection on the rock wall, he could clearly see a few strong and ferocious men. Judging from their attire, they should be the ninjas of the Mist Village. Serves you right, idiot kid, who told you to be a ninja from Konoha, haha. The arrogant laughter sounded, and the tone was arrogant. Several Mist ninjas looked at the little girl with disdain. Their faces were full of contempt and hatred. Maybe if it wasn't for some special reason, they would have already cut the little girl into pieces. There was even a Mist ninja who stepped on the girl's head ruthlessly, twisting his foot back and forth. His sharp eyes were emotionless, and his cold eyes were filled with endless disgust. Shut up, you bunch of trash. If this little girl is going to die, I'll skin you brats alive. Her life is much more precious than you bunch of trash. A powerful roar sounded from the deepest part of the cave, and the flowing air was shaken, forming a large vacuum area. The tone was full of arrogance and contempt. Looking in the direction of the voice, one could vaguely make out a huge fat man with a huge saber full of fangs on his back. The saber looked like the fangs of a shark. It was one of the 7 legendary swordsmen, Fugumiki. A bunch of trash who bully the weak and fear the strong. Seeing the Mist Shinobi stopped and looked at him with fear, Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish curled his lips and said with disdain, Sambai Jinchuriki, when we return to Konoha, there will be a good show to watch. Gazing at the unconscious girl on the ground and sensing the power of the tailed beast within her, the Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost's chubby face couldn't help but curl into a mocking and ruthless smile. The girl's face was quite beautiful, without any blemishes. She was wearing a Konoha headband on her head, but there were still traces of tears on both sides of her eyes. The last time he was crushed by the Sannin, he was still holding a grudge, and he couldn't wait for the Mist to launch a fierce attack on Konoha. The Mist's plan was quite simple and thorough. They just used Rin's identity as a Konoha ninja. They intended to use her identity to enter Konoha, and open the seal to make the Sambai attack Konoha. This time Konoha must... Boom. 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 Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost's words stopped abruptly, and the cave suddenly trembled, and countless rocks began to fall off on a large scale. There was a trend of collapse. Damn it, what's going on? Is it possible that Konoha's ninjas are attacking us? Feeling the unprecedented violent tremors, Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost's chubby face turned black, and his eyes were uncertain. When he was about to go out to investigate, the tremors in the cave became more violent. Kakaka. The golden light was like a peerless divine sword, cutting through all obstacles and completely piercing through the cave. A ray of dazzling sunlight shone into the interior of the cave, and the cave that had not seen the sun for many years began to show some signs of life. This is... Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost looked at the golden light that penetrated the interior of the cave, and for a moment he couldn't react, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. It was precisely because he felt that this cave was difficult to destroy, as it was as strong as a mountain, and difficult to break through, that he chose this place as his base. But now someone actually broke it with a casual blow, and how could he not be angry? Especially the golden light that appeared for a moment. It gave him a feeling of déjà vu, as if he had fought with it in the past. He suddenly looked up and saw 2 black shadows rushing down. Who are you two? The Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost's expression darkened as he looked at the 2 figures that had appeared like ghosts. To be able to easily break through such a sturdy cave, their strength was naturally that of someone beyond the dimension. These 2 ghostly figures were naturally Dustless and Otsutsuki Dustless. The only difference was that Dustless was wearing a special spiral mask, which was almost identical to Uchiha Obito's mask. I advise you not to meddle in other people's business. We are ninjas of the Mist Village. The Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost sensed that something was wrong when he saw the cold aura coming from the 2 of them. Just from the aura alone, he knew that the strength of these 2 people was definitely the kind that could only be looked up to and could not be touched. At the moment he could only use the name of the mist to scare them, and hope that they would leave. However, Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost was obviously whimsical. I didn't hear what you said. Wu Chun, who was wearing a mask, looked at the cautious Watermelon Mountain and River Dolphin Ghost with a smile. He deliberately picked his ears, indicating that he didn't hear anything. He looked at Dolphin Ghost with a playful look. Then, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. His whole body was covered with flowing light. Then he disappeared and rushed out. Do you know what the speed of light is? And, the feeling of being kicked by the speed of light, do you know? A lazy voice suddenly appeared behind Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost, and the tone was particularly lazy. Chapter 107. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? The Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish was slightly startled by the lazy and strange voice behind it. Just as it was about to leave, the golden light behind it suddenly expanded, and it could vaguely see a powerful golden calf rumbling towards it. Speed of light kick. The long leg shined with golden light, as it hit the back of the Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish without any mercy. Boom! The Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost coughed up blood, and he felt as if his back had been kicked by a prehistoric beast. The bones in his back collapsed, and his blood boiled. His organs were dislocated, and his life force was quickly draining away. The Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish flew out like a cannonball. Boom! 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 The black shadow smashed open the entrance of the cave, leaving behind a huge hole. The sealed cave immediately had free air vents, and a cool breeze blew in from the hole in front. The dry depths of the cave finally became much cooler. Looking closer, the black shadow was the Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish that had turned into a pile of flesh and blood. It's really fragile. Staring at the flesh and blood of the Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish, Dustless shook his head helplessly. He immediately took off the spiral mask and revealed his handsome face. His dark eyes were still like stagnant water, and there was no emotional fluctuation that a human should have. Dustless glanced at the body of the Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish, and turned away without any change in his expression. The so-called 7 legendary swordsmen of the ninja sword were not even an appetizer for him. Mother Kerr. How dare you sneak attack us? Run, idiot! Didn't you see that the Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish of the 7 legendary swordsmen of the ninja sword was kicked into pieces by him? Seeing that the Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish was brutally kicked by Dustless, the rest of the ninjas couldn't help but feel a chill down their spine. They looked at Dustless, who was walking towards them with a smile on his face, and chose to run away. Go to hell. Lifting his hand slightly, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes flashed with a cold light. He waved his hand and released a powerful repulsive force. Several mist ninjas who were trying to escape were instantly smashed to the rock wall. The tyrannical force turned all of them into meat paste. This little girl is really savage. Seeing this, Dustless couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. If he had chosen to submit to Otsutsuki Imuro on the moon, his end might have been even more miserable than this. Is the power in this little girl's body the three-tailed beast? Otsutsuki Haguro walked over gracefully. Her eyes turned into the Tensigen, and carefully stared at the unconscious Noera Rin for a long time before she spoke. The surprise in her eyes disappeared in a flash, and once again returned to the black eyes of the ancient well. The power of a tailed beast is just SOSO. Hearing this, Wuchen just rolled his eyes, but he didn't refute it. For Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who has the Tensigen, the only person who can threaten her is the legendary Jubi. Don't you want to collect tailed beasts to resurrect the Jubi? This little girl has the Jubi, why don't you? Otsutsuki Hagoromo looked at Dustless, her clear eyes bloomed with a cold light, and her thin lips slightly opened as she softly suggested. After many days of observation, Otsutsuki Hagoromo has been completely disappointed with the world created by the Sage of the Six Paths. Only, as Dustless said, only by completely reassembling the chakra, and taking the chakra of all the people in the world, can the world restore temporary peace. Don't worry about it. It's not that Dustless didn't want to take the tailed beasts, but anyone whose Jinchuriki was taken would die. Of course, the Jubi was an exception, because the Geto Mazo left abundant vitality in his body. Even if his tailed beast was taken, he wouldn't be able to move for a few months at most. But Noera Rin was different. After her tailed beast was taken, she would die without a doubt. Dustless was counting on her to pull Obito into the group, Not to send her to hell now. Do you have a detailed plan? Otsutsuki Hagoromo stared at Dustless with expectation, and after covering her slightly messy silver hair to her ears, her eyes flashed with a burning luster. Although Dustless promised to marry Otsutsuki Hagoromo, no woman wants her future husband to be an idiot, not only in terms of force, but also in terms of intelligence. Plan? Bullshit plan. Absolute power crushes all plans. Throwing a supercilious look at Otsutsuki Yuluo, Wuchen shrugged his shoulders and smiled unscrupulously. His face was full of indifference, as if he had nothing to lose. You. Otsutsuki Hagoromo's mouth twitched fiercely, and his chest rose and fell, making Dustless's mouth dry, and his eyes swayed up and down with the rhythm of Otsutsuki Hagoromo's chest. Glaring at Dustless, Otsutsuki Hagoromo suddenly felt that his innocent face was extremely annoying, and couldn't wait to punch him into 8 pieces. Otsutsuki patted his beautiful forehead with a headache. Although Otsutsuki agreed with Dustless's statement, he didn't have a detailed step-by-step plan. Maybe the one who will resurrect the Jubi in the end will be Madara. In that case, glancing coldly at Noera-rin, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes flashed with wisdom, and said in a deep voice, "This kid seems to know that she has become the Sanbai's Jinchuriki. In that case, we will let nature take its course. We only need to secretly implant a special charm in her body so that she can't hurt herself." Speaking of this, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's handsome face swept with hostility, and said coldly, "I will use the Tensigen or your Mangekyo to control her mind, and let this little girl named Noera-rin slaughter the ninjas of Konoha." Hearing this, Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Hagoromo with a cold expression, and took a deep breath. This plan is vicious. Noera-rin is an extremely kind ninja, and she loves the ninjas of the same village very much. Knowing that she will inevitably have thoughts of suicide after she slaughters Konoha's ninjas, as long as she dies in the hands of Kakashi. This woman. Fortunately, she is one of us. Dustless said in his heart. Fortunately, he promised to marry her. Otherwise, this crazy woman may join forces with Uchiha Madara to kill him. Chapter 108. Otsutsuki Haruo frowned slightly. Seeing Dustless looking at her like a monster, she raised her nose and stared at Dustless with dissatisfaction. Her clear eyes flashed with a hint of slyness. "I might as well tell you if you had refused me." Her eyes circled around Dustless, her slender fingers pointed to her chin. The banter on Otsutsuki Haruo's pretty face became more intense. Her beautiful face had a charming little dimple, and her whole body was full of unprecedented coquettishness, like a deadly poison, like a peerless enchantress, full of unprecedented attractiveness. Turning his head with an extremely unnatural expression, Dustless hurriedly avoided Otsutsuki Haruo's clear and spotless eyes, fearing that his heart would be seen through by those eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. What will happen?" There was a rare tremor in his voice. Dustless also wanted to know, if he refused Otsutsuki Haruo's unreasonable request, would this woman go crazy and chase him to the ends of the earth? "Of course, I will chase you to the earth and cut you into pieces." Blinking her eyes, looking at Dustless who didn't dare to look at her, Otsutsuki Haruo said very seriously. Her breathing was steady, her heartbeat was also extremely normal, and her face was as usual, without the slightest hint of joking. "Then I am still alive now. Shouldn't I thank you for not killing me?" The corner of his eyes twitched vigorously. Dustless rolled his eyes speechlessly, deliberately dragging his voice, looking at the complacent Otsutsuki Haruo. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Otsutsuki Haruo nodded very seriously, apparently what Dustless meant. "Are we just going to leave this brat here?" Looking at Rin who continued to sleep, Dustless frowned and asked Otsutsuki Haruo. "Uchiha Obito is not easy to deal with. We must not let him see any flaws, otherwise, we can only lift a stone and smash our own feet." Dustless naturally understood Uchiha Obito's madness. The reason why Uchiha Madara spent so much time and effort to make him completely fall was also to set off Obito's extraordinary ability. No, don't worry, after all, Uchiha Obito is still a kid. As for this little girl, Otsutsuki Haruo signaled Dustless that there was no need to care about Uchiha Obito's problem, then looked at Rin and whispered, "Send her back to Konoha's base, and then control her mind with Tennigan." As for Uchiha Obito's matter, Dustless didn't need to worry about it. Uchiha Madara gave this task to White Zetsu. Maybe Obito was rescued by White Zetsu, and he was facing Madara's attack. Send her back to Konoha's base. After saying that, Dustless put on the spiral mask again. After all, the world already knew that he was completely dead, and he was very good at controlling the world behind the scenes. Konoha's ninja base. Konoha's ninjas were really the most resilient existence. Although they were fighting with the Rock's ninjas all day and night, they didn't feel the lack of physical strength, and they were still fighting with high morale. Konoha's brainwashing was very successful. Compared to the tired Rock's ninjas, they were much more confident. It's been a long time, Konoha. Looking at the bonfire in the distance, Konoha's ninjas were obviously preparing dinner, Dustless said with emotion. Once upon a time, he was loyal to Konoha's vanguard, the captain of the fire brigade. Wherever there was a fire, he was the vanguard. The girl Dustless was holding in his right arm was naturally Rin Noera. His figure swept into Konoha's ninja village like a ghost. His movements were extremely skillful. Although Konoha's ninja village had a lot of defense barriers around it, they didn't have any effect on him. His body was transparent and he ignored the barriers, and he easily invaded. Goodbye. Tragic child crushed by the gears of time. Glancing at Rin, who was sleeping peacefully, Dustless was about to turn around and leave, but suddenly a dazzling golden light flashed beside him, and immediately a man with blonde hair and dark blue eyes appeared in front of him, holding a high-speed rotating chakra energy ball in his hand. It was Namikaze Minato, who had the title, Yellow Flash. Boom! Dustless under the Rasengan mask smiled indifferently, and immediately jumped horizontally, easily avoiding the attack of the Rasengan. The Rasengan hit the ground and blasted a deep hole in the ground. It's a pity you are fast, but I am faster than you. Floating in the air indifferently, Dustless said. Now for him who controlled the Tensigan, floating in the air was just a trivial matter. You can float. Seeing Dustless floating in the air, Namikaze Minato's dark blue eyes were filled with surprise. It may be a trivial matter for Dustless, but looking at the whole world, there are only a few people who can float in the air without external help, definitely not more than 5. But you are still wrong. His pupils suddenly flashed with cold light, and in an instant, Namikaze Minato appeared behind Dustless floating in the air, and the Rasengan in his hand was much bigger than before. I'm still faster than you. After that, the Rasengan in Namikaze Minato's hand roared and smashed toward Dustless's back. So that's how it is. You are indeed the man who will be the 4th Hokage in the future. Slightly turning his head, looking at the ninjutsu mark on his shoulder, Dustless frowned slightly, and immediately remembered the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, and then his eyebrows relaxed, and his face showed a clear color. The Flying Thunder God Jutsu left on me in advance when he attacked me. Really smart and cunning. But what can I do? Dustless said to himself without looking back, and his face was indifferent, letting the rapidly rotating Rasengan close to him. Chapter 109. His dark blue eyes stared at Wu Chen's back, and he didn't move at all. Seeing that Wu Chen didn't dodge and let the Rasengan touch his body, Minato's eyebrows unconsciously raised, and his brows wrinkled, forming a clear Chuan character. Is it possible that he can ignore my ninjutsu, or, holding his kunai to defend against Dustless? Minato stared at Dustless, and at the same time his eyes locked on Dustless's Rasengan, and his breathing became unusually heavy. This is? Seeing the Rasengan close to Dustless's back, Minato's pupils instantly widened, and his face was full of disbelief. He thought that Dustless's physical fitness was strong enough to be used as steel, but he would still be injured, but in fact it was not the case. The Rasengan was like a grain of sand sinking into the sea, without the slightest ripple. The moment it entered Dustless's body, it was instantly absorbed by a special force. Dustless's body was like a black hole in the depths of the universe, with endless devouring power. Is it a space ninjutsu that transferred the Rasengan? Looking at the masked man Dustless with uncertain eyes, Minato's heart fell to the bottom. In fact, he hoped that this was a space ninjutsu similar to Flying Thunder God, but he always had a feeling that it wasn't. It meant that this was a ninjutsu that he had never seen before, and it was likely to be stranger than space ninjutsu. Often, the unknown is more dangerous. Don't show such a surprised expression. That was just a trick to fool children. Seeing Namikaze's Minato on guard, Dustless smiled faintly, and his tone was indeed insignificant. In fact, Dustless just used the ability of Tensigen to absorb chakra. But even so, for Namikaze Minato, who had never seen such a strange situation before, it was indeed worthy of him being extremely cautious. The gap between you and me is too big. In fact, for the future, erasing you is just a matter of a moment. Staring at Minato's face, Dustless under the spiral mask said very calmly. Minato's biggest advantage was the absolute speed shown by the Flying Thunder God, but it didn't pose any threat to Dustless, and the effect was minimal. If you can come at me. Namikaze Minato turned a deaf ear to Wu Chen's sarcasm. His aura was calm, and his heart was as calm as an ancient well, as if it was made of iron. He was not moved at all, but simply frowned. You'll know what it means to not kill you. The corner of his mouth raised a strange smile. Even with the mask covering his face, Minato could hear the sound of his mouth grinding, which made him feel uncomfortable, especially uncomfortable, and had a creepy feeling. After all, you're not in the set of the script. Casually glancing at Minato, Dustless's eyes suddenly fell on Rin, who was lying motionless on the ground. His dark pupils twisted sharply, and his right eye turned into a blue Tensigen. Under Minato's surprised gaze, Dustless's Tensigen in his right eye flashed with a strong fluctuation of dojutsu. What kind of eye is that? It gives me a horrible feeling. Naturally, Namikaze Minato saw spotless Tensigen, especially the berserk eye power that could forcibly distort time and space, which made him feel a palpitation and fear from the depths of his soul. Perhaps, as Dustless said before, maybe killing Minato was just a matter of thought. Ouch! At the same time, Rin, who was lying on the ground sleeping, suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were scarlet, and a strong chakra disaster appeared on her body. Her skin was covered with a bijou coat, and her eyes were filled with endless killing intent. A roar similar to a beast came out of Rin's mouth. Go. Her pupils suddenly widened, and the Tensigen once again flashed with a strong fluctuation of dojutsu. Rin's chakra erupted again, and she went straight to the front where Konoha's ninjas were preparing to attack. A ruthless slaughter was about to begin. Although it's the opposite of the original design concept of the script, at least it's not in vain. Letting out a sigh of relief, Wu Chen's anxious heart was put down. Although the person was wrong, it was not a big deal. Originally, Rin was willing to die under Kakashi's chakra, but the current situation was different. The difference was not small, but in short, as long as Obito completely fell, nothing else mattered. That's the chakra of the bijou. Looking at Rin rushing towards Konoha's ninjas with a pale face, even if Minato's state of mind was good, at this moment he was still angry, and his anger continued to burn his reason. You actually sealed the sanbai in Rin's body. What is your so-called script? She's just an ordinary ninja. She shouldn't be worthy of being used by someone like you. Looking at Dustless, Minato's eyes were filled with killing intent, and at the same time, he couldn't help but worry about Rin's future. Even if he can subdue her, will she still be accepted after killing Konoha's ninjas? Obviously not. There's no need to worry about her future. Seeing through Minato's naive attitude, Dustless's eyes were cold, and he said coldly, Rin will die, and the person who will kill her with your own hands will be your teacher, Minato. After saying that, Dustless sneered. Originally, according to the script, the person who should kill Rin should be Kakashi. However, perhaps because of the appearance of Dustless, many of Kakashi's scripts were snatched away by Dustless. Of course, although Kakashi was successfully promoted to Jonin, according to the current situation, Kakashi, the white-haired kid, was not in Konoha's base. Therefore, the task of killing Rin could only be done by Minato and Beitai. Chapter 110. In the dark depths of the underground, Madara was no longer the same as before. The color in his pupils had obviously dimmed, and he had lost his luster. All the cells in his body were completely necrotic, and he was powerless. It was as if as long as the wind gently brushed his body, he would completely pass away. Despite having the Geromazo to prolong his life, Uchiha Madara has been struggling at death's door for decades. Now it can be said that he is completely exhausted. He has reached his limit, and there is no hope for him to continue. Madara-sama, that kid seems to have woken up. White Zetsu respectfully looked at Uchiha Madara, who was bowing his head in contemplation. Even though Madara was already in his twilight years and could die at any time, White Zetsu didn't dare to make a sound. And his tone was always respectful. Anyone who underestimates Uchiha Madara will step into a place of no return. That kid's vitality is quite strong. He didn't die even after being smashed like that. He's really lucky. Madara looked at the boy lying on the stone bed, and his old eyes flashed with deep surprise. Half of his body was smashed, but he was still able to hold on until White Zetsu came to save him. This extremely strong vitality surprised him. But it's because of such a strong and extraordinary talent that he's valuable to me. Madara walked over with heavy steps, and laughed in his heart. Obito was undoubtedly very suitable to carry out his Eye of the Moon plan, and now it's up to him to fool him. At this moment, Obito's whole body was wrapped in bandages, and his face was pale as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His pupils were slightly opened, and it seemed that he hadn't adapted yet. He glanced back and forth at the surrounding environment, and his face was filled with endless hesitation. Uchiha clan's undead. An old and weak voice rang out. Although he tried his best to maintain his imposing manner, anyone could hear that he was lacking in power. You are, it hurts. Obito raised his head and looked at the old man walking towards him with a black scythe in his hand. Obito's pupils shrank as he was filled with fear. Just as he was about to scream, his bandaged body started to crack again, and a lot of blood oozed out of it. He was in so much pain that he didn't want to live anymore. Even so, he endured the piercing pain all over his body and looked at the old man in horror. I am Uchiha Madara. When he arrived in front of Obito, Madara's eyes turned sharply, and his murky old eye sockets emitted a power that was countless times stronger than Obito's. Madara's aura became even more powerful, and his old face, which had been dead for many years, showed some color. Are you a human or a ghost? Is this the underworld? When Obito saw Madara's face, he was so scared that he stood up and looked at Madara with fear. Especially when he saw the sharp black scythe in his hand, his heart was in his throat, and he couldn't help but gulp. You didn't die, you were miraculously saved by my subordinates, and this is not the underworld. Of course, it's not wrong to think that this is the underworld. After looking at Obito carefully for a moment, Madara slowly said, and his eyes flashed with disappointment. This chess piece, whether in strength or wisdom, was worse than Dustless. When Dustless saw Obito, he was very surprised and couldn't believe it. Compared to Obito, who looked like he had seen a ghost, Dustless was much stronger. Boy, do you see the cruelty of this world? After a helpless sigh, Madara abandoned his dissatisfaction with Obito, and his eyes flashed with a bright light, which made Obito scared. Cruelty? It seemed that Obito was scared by Madara's appearance, and his eyes were empty and gray. He temporarily lost the ability to think, and could only follow Madara's will. What does this mean? Looking at Madara, Obito didn't know if it was subconscious or mechanical. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. Hearing this, Madara nodded faintly and immediately said, Because you are weak, you are trampled by the enemy. Because you are weak, you can't protect your friends. Because you are weak, you can't protect your loved ones. Because you are weak, you can only be indifferent to the destruction of your loved ones. Old man, what do you mean? Hearing this, Obito looked at Madara, who was talking nonsense. If Madara didn't say that he was the one who saved him, Obito would have kicked him out. The little girl named Rin Noera is in trouble. Madara looked up at White Zetsu, indicating that he should say it. Rin, what did you say? Hearing White Zetsu say that Rin was in trouble, Obito jumped up like a cat whose tail was stepped on. He ignored his injuries and looked at White Zetsu coldly. The mist ninja sealed the sambai in her body, and now she's causing trouble in Konoha's camp. Looking at Obito's eyes, White Zetsu felt uncomfortable and said, Rin seems to have been completely controlled by the bijou, and now she's become a killing machine. Boom. Perhaps because half of his body was made up of Hashirama's cells, Obito felt much stronger than before, and the amount of chakra in his body increased a lot. He directly shattered the stone bed he was lying on. An endless killing intent floated in his eyes. His body rushed out like a cannonball. Madara-sama, if we ignore that kid. Seeing Obito leave, White Zetsu frowned and looked quite distressed. It doesn't matter. You go and inform Dustless that Obito is here, and it's time to start the show, and welcome Obito's first and only audience. Chapter 111. Konoha's Ninja Village Station. A girl wearing a crimson bijou coat was as fast as lightning, shuttling between Konoha's ninjas. Every time she raised her sword, she would take away a large number of Konoha's ninjas. She was like a killing machine, mercilessly slaughtering Konoha's ninjas. Slowly savor the remaining time. With a cunning smile on his face, Dustless's voice sounded like a ghost, but his body became more and more ethereal, and his whole body completely lost its texture. Don't even think about escaping. Seeing Dustless's figure showing signs of dissipating, Minato's eyes immediately swept over, and his body appeared behind Dustless in the next second. I said, the gap is too big. The reason why I didn't kill you is because you're the best actor in this show. Slightly turning back, revealing half of his mask, the Tensigen surged with endless cold light. Dustless's clothes suddenly fluttered, and with himself as the center, the incomparably tyrannical repulsive force spread directly in all directions. The repulsive force erupted, forming a hollow area. Boom. Minato was suddenly hit by the repulsive force. The invisible repulsive force couldn't be touched at all, and he couldn't defend against it. His body was instantly bounced out, fragile and powerless like a broken kite, flying upside down and slamming into the rock wall. Sure enough, it's a very troublesome thing, but it doesn't have any effect on me. Looking at the space coordinates of the flying thunder god on his shoulder, Dustless's mouth raised with contempt, and immediately the chakra erupted, and the unique mark of the flying thunder god disappeared. Dustless's body then disappeared, and on Konoha's station, only Rin was left, completely under the control of the bijou or Dustless's Tensigen. Her thin figure was like a machine, killing Konoha's ninjas without any emotion. Compared with the usual gentle and pure Rin, she was like a demon from hell at this moment. The strength of the Sambai is at the bottom of the bijou list. Compared to the Kyubi or the Hachibi, it's naturally a world of difference. But for Konoha's ninjas, it's an unprecedented terror. It can easily crush them like ants. Especially the Bijudama that flew out from time to time. It was even more irresistible. It destroyed the sky and destroyed the earth. Even the mountains that came in contact with it easily collapsed. It made Konoha's ninjas completely desperate. The situation was completely one-sided. Lin, stop. They are all your former companions. Minato looked bitterly at Rin, who was killing Konoha's ninjas. Minato's dark blue eyes were scarlet, and his hatred for Dustless was even more intense. He had never hated a person so much. He hated him so thoroughly, and he couldn't wait to tear him to pieces. Hearing Minato's heartache, it seemed to awaken her inner reason. Rin's fierce offensive suddenly stopped, and her eyes that were full of havoc also recovered a little bit of clarity. She looked at Minato with a pale face. Although Rin couldn't speak, Minato could hear her cry for help. It was a sense of powerlessness that originated from the depths of her soul. This is really an unpleasant scene. Seeing Rin's little universe erupting just now and resisting his control, Wu Chun, who was secretly observing from a distance, was taken aback. Immediately, the corner of his mouth turned cold, and a more powerful eye power surged out from the Tensigen in his right eye. Rin, who was struggling to resist Dustless's control, once again fought Konoha's ninjas, like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves, raging Konoha's ninjas. Damn the masked man. Seeing this, Minato's heart became more gloomy. He took a deep breath, and a flash of determination flashed through his eyes. It seems that between Rin and Konoha's ninjas, he must make a choice. Dustless-sama. At Dustless's feet, White Zetsu poked his head out from the ground and looked at Rin, who was strangling Konoha's ninjas, and said, "Uchiha Obito is coming." Hearing this, Dustless nodded slightly, and immediately a cold light flashed in his eyes, and said indifferently, "That's for the best, almost all the actors are here. It seems that the big show can start." White Zetsu also nodded. Whoosh! The golden light suddenly exploded, turning into a straight ray of light that swept towards Rin. Looking up, she saw Minato holding a kunai in front of Rin, with a cold expression on his face. It's nice to see a master and disciple killing each other. Seeing this, Dustless smiled faintly. His calm eyes continued to manipulate Noara Rin and Namikaze Minato to fight. Noara Rin's strength was naturally not as good as Namikaze Minato. Even if she transformed into a tailed beast, she was not as strong as Namikaze Minato. However, due to the control of Dustless, he was evenly matched with Namikaze Minato, and he even had a slight advantage. Rasengan. Seeing Rin rushing towards him again, Minato's eyes narrowed, and his chakra surged. And in his hand was a high-speed rotating chakra energy ball, which was his specialty, Rasengan. Good chance. In the distance, Dustless saw Minato's murderous intent, and his mouth suddenly raised a smirk, and the Tensigan suddenly turned into a normal human's eyes, and he took back his power, and at the same time suppressed the Sambai's power in Rin's body. Pucci. Losing Dustless's power and the Sambai's power, Rin immediately turned back to the original fragile little girl, and her flexible abdomen was instantly torn into pieces by the high-speed rotating Rasengan, and became a bloody mess. This, looking at Rin's abdomen, Namikaze Minato's pupils instantly widened, and he was shocked. He didn't expect Rin to be pierced by him. Instead, his Rasengan was sent flying just like before. Senseiyu. Rin, who recovered, looked at the arm inserted in her chest in horror. She expected to die, but the one who didn't kill her was her most respected sensei. And this scene was seen by Uchiha Obito. Chapter 112. The emotions of the Uchiha clan have always been emotional. The Sharingan is also known as the soul portrayal eye. The Uchiha clan has always had great love, and once they lose their love, a special chakra will emerge from the brain, reflecting the visual nerves and causing changes to the eyes. This process is known as eye-opening. Seeing the love of his life die at the hands of Minato, Uchiha Obito's pupils suddenly turned sharply, surpassing the world's understanding of the Sharingan. The two-tomo Sharingan in his eyes suddenly turned into the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. Namikaze Minato. Obito's face suddenly became distorted, terrifying like a ghost. Seeing Rin's abdomen being twisted into pieces by Minato, hatred continued to attack the remaining reason in his mind. A burning murderous intent that he had never felt before appeared in his mind, and a cold murderous intent floated out of his body, causing the surrounding temperature to drop to the freezing point. Boom. Just when Obito couldn't suppress his anger, and was about to kill Minato, a figure jumped out of the void and kicked Obito away. It's amazing. He actually broke the rules of the Uchiha clan's eye-opening. With only two tomo, he can directly open the Mangekyo Sharingan. After kicking Obito away, Dustless looked at Obito's Mangekyo Sharingan in surprise. The way he looked at Obito also changed. If Obito was at the bottom of the list, then there is no such thing as a genius in the world. Recalling the history of Uchiha Obito's Sharingan, Dust felt that he was weak. When he opened his Sharingan, it was the Sharingan with two tomo, and it was the same with the Mangekyo. The so-called common sense was trampled on and worthless in front of Uchiha Obito. Who the hell are you? Looking at Dustless, who was also wearing a mask, Obito, who was kicked away by Dustless, shouted hysterically at Dustless, his eyes full of beast-like madness. I advise you to save it. Rin has already been killed by Minato. This is an undeniable fact. Dustless's voice didn't completely fall, and Obito appeared in front of him, with a sharp kunai aimed at Dustless's neck. It looked like he wanted to completely split Dustless in two. You may be my opponent in the future, but right now you're still too young. Even with your Mangekyo Sharingan, you're still so weak, as small as an ant. Staring at Obito's murderous face, Dustless smiled faintly, especially when he looked at the kunai coming towards him. He shook his head with contempt. This kind of child's toys can't hurt me, let alone kill me. Shaking his head, Dustless looked at Obito with pity. Rin was killed by him, but the act still has to go on. He can't say that his little lover was killed by me, right? Although Dustless sympathized with Obito, there were too many people in the world who had a hard life, just like the sand in the Ganges. Whoosh! The sharp kunai pierced through Dustless's body, but Dustless himself was fine. Obito looked at Dustless in a daze. This was the first time he saw such a strange scene in his life. For a moment his hatred for Minato disappeared, and his eyes were dull. Under the surprised gaze of Uchiha Obito, Dustless's finger rose and stopped at Uchiha Obito's eyebrows, and then he flicked it lightly. Boom! Although Dustless just flicked his finger casually, and didn't even touch his face, Obito felt like he was kicked by a thick leg that weighed thousands of pounds. This guy isn't Kyuubi's cousin, is he? Obito's mouth twitched, and his tone was full of surprise, looking at Dustless in disbelief. However, White Zetsu on the side was unusually calm. Someone who can fight with Madara can't be ordinary. Now you realize how fragile you are. The Mangekyo Sharingan is not invincible, especially you, who only has one Mangekyo Sharingan. It's impossible for you to be the opponent of Minato. Looking at Obito's unwilling face, Dustless shook his head. He spent a lot of effort to turn Obito into the black, and he didn't want him to die in vain. Minato's strength was also not bad. Not to mention that Obito had just opened his Mangekyo, and he didn't have complete control of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Even if Obito attacked Konoha in the future, Minato didn't get any advantage, and instead got himself into trouble. Rin is my everything, and anyone who stands in the way of my revenge is the enemy of Uchiha Obito. His mask was broken by Dustless, and Obito no longer hid his identity. He gritted his teeth and said to Dustless, "You seem to know that old man, Uchiha Madara. Although he saved me, if you stop me, I will kill you." Obito's face was full of killing intent, and his Mangekyo flashed with a demonic light. Obviously he was serious. "Just you?" Hearing this, Dustless was stunned at first, and then immediately sneered at Obito. Even Madara didn't dare to say that he could take him down. He didn't expect that this kid would dare to say that he could kill him. It seems that the lesson just now didn't make him more aware of his strength, but made him even more arrogant. A mere firefly's light wants to shine with the moon. Well, today I will let you see how weak you are. Looking at Obito's stubborn face, Dustless suddenly made a decision in his heart. It was good to teach Obito a lesson now, lest this kid keep staring at him in the future. Maybe one day he would be bold enough to plot against him. In that case, I will let you see the power of the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. Chapter 113. The Sharingan is the sole portrayal eye. Everyone's pursuit is different, so their abilities are different. Among them, Uchiha Obito and Uchiha Shisui are the best. Whether it is Obito's Kamui or Shisui's Kodo Amatsukami, both are extremely powerful ninjutsu, especially Shisui, which has almost no means of defense. No matter who you are, I advise you to mind your own business. The ability of my Mangekyo Sharingan is not something you can defend against. Staring at Dustless, who was wearing a spiral mask, Obito's tone was cold, and he didn't hide his killing intent, but he still didn't make a move. Whether it's because of Uchiha Obito's fear of Dustless's strength or some other reason, there's no doubt about it. Although the current Uchiha Obito has been corrupted, it can be seen that he still has a conscience for the time being. If it was the future Uchiha Obito, he might have already killed Dustless. Come at me, no ninjutsu is effective in front of me. Dustless smiled happily under the mask, and his eyes were always calm. Although the ability of Kamui is elusive, there are also loopholes and shortcomings. The basic principle is to transfer one's body or other objects from the real space to another space, interfering with the real space to achieve various effects. The biggest weakness is that when absorbing or releasing objects, the body must be solid, and because the chakra must be concentrated in the eyes to launch Kamui, the body is vulnerable to attack. The later yondaime of Konami Namikaze Minato used this ability to cause physical damage to Obito, and some can only be used for passive defense, and can't attack others. Since you're not coming, I'll go. Seeing that Obito didn't move for a long time, Dustless frowned slightly and immediately changed from defense to offense. His whole body turned into a shining light as he crossed the space, and almost instantly appeared in front of Obito. Laser. Dustless, who intended to teach Obito a lesson, naturally didn't hold back, and directly swept a beam, of course, aiming at Obito's arm. After all, Dustless still needs him. Boom! The golden light passed through Obito's body, and broke a few trees not far behind him. Just the power shown casually gave a feeling of destruction. Penetrated? The golden light passed through Obito's body, but there was no wound on his body. Obviously, he had already guessed that Dustless would attack, and was prepared in advance, and grasped the timing very well. But so what? In the face of absolute speed, any ability is pale and powerless. After a brief surprise, Dustless's mouth raised a cold light, and at this time Obito, who had finished Obito, took the opportunity to pull away from Dustless. This guy's strength is terrifying. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Obito thought to himself with a vigilant expression. Since you want to cross over my body to avenge Noera Rin, why are you pulling away from me? Dustless glanced at Obito from the corner of his eyes, and said indifferently, "You will never be able to avenge that little girl. You're just trying to cover up your powerlessness, because you can't touch me." In response to Dustless's sneer, Obito also chose to ridicule him. In his opinion, Dustless was just trying to cover up his embarrassment and protest. The ignorant are fearless. Hearing this, Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. In fact, as long as you know the principle of Kamui, it's very easy to crack it. As long as Dustless wanted to, he could almost instantly crush Obito. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light, Obito? A lazy voice sounded. Wuxia squinted his eyes and looked at Uchiha Obito lazily. Unconsciously, he also liked Kazara's catchphrase. Obito was taken aback, and after thinking about it, he frowned and looked at Dustless. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. No one in the world understands the speed of light. Seeing Obito's puzzled look, Dustless just smiled casually, and then his eyes became cold, and he said coldly, "You will soon understand what the speed of light is, little devil." Speed of light kick. Boom. As soon as Dustless's voice fell, Obito was kicked away, and even with the terrifying insight of Mangekyo, he couldn't see the trajectory of Dustless's movement. Obito didn't see how Dustless ran over. This guy. Pucci. Looking at the deep hole in his chest, Obito's face was pale, and he spat out red blood from the corner of his mouth. He finally understood the meaning of Dustless's words. It means that when Dustless's body glows with golden light, everything will end. This is the speed of light. Tsukuyomi. Taking advantage of Obito's sluggish look, Dustless used Tsukuyomi's powerful genjutsu to instantly put him down. This kid is simply courting death by challenging Minato now. He can wait until Kyuubi attacks Konoha in the future. Dustless. Looking at the unconscious Obito, Dustless's eyes were emotionless, and then he looked up at the sky, and his eyes looked at the void in front of him with contempt, and his aura was extremely cold. It was even more domineering than Madara. Dustless-sama. White Zetsu suddenly came out from the depths of the ground, his face full of respect. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game best. Why did Dustless give Obito the time to launch Kamui? He should have been able to kill Obito instantly, just like now. Uchiha Madara may not understand, but White Zetsu saw through it. The reason why Obito used Kamui was deliberately done by Dustless. That was to completely destroy his confidence, and to tell Madara that in the face of absolute speed, any technique is invalid. You're tuning in to the Lee Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.